Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this regular business meeting of the Loveland Board of Education. I'd like to call us to order at 6:01 p.m. and ask our treasurer, Mr. Hawley, for a roll call.
Dr. Lorenz.
Here.
Ms. Pettit. I think you're on mute, Michelle.
There, how's that one?
Yes, thank you. All right, Ms. Pettit.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here.
Thank you.
We do have two appointed board members here, and they will be sworn in and then added to our agenda as we move along. So again, I'd like to welcome you all, and I would ask that the first item of business is to adopt the agenda for this meeting this evening. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? I see Mrs. Washburn's hand first and then Ms. Pettit's. So that's how we will go. There is a motion. The agenda is on board docs for anyone who is watching on the YouTube stream. The agenda is on board docs, and I believe there's an extra link there in case we have any problems with the meeting the way we did last time, so that if we need to move to another link, that is available for our audience. Any questions about the agenda from board members? All right, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that agenda?
Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. The agenda now says I should welcome guests. I've already welcomed you, and I am welcoming all of our directors who are in the YouTube meeting. They may not always be showing up on the screen, but they will be when called upon or when they have reports. So I would ask you at this point if you would rise and listen to the Pledge of Allegiance as recited by Eileen Washburn and her daughter Hannah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a little bit of a blip there in the pledge, but I appreciate everybody being patient with us as we have technological blips. The first item after the Pledge of Allegiance is a very important item. We have the oath of office of two new board members this evening. So Mr. Hawley, will you administer the oath of office to Mr. Doherty and Dr. Schwetzenow?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lorenz. We're really excited to have both of you on board with us. So if you could raise your right hand for me, please. Do you, Kevin Doherty and Eric Schwetzenow, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as a member of the Board of Education of the Loveland City School District, Hamilton County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereinafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? The answer is I do.
I do.
I do.
Great, thank you.
Congratulations and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're very glad to have you with us. We're glad to be a full board again.
Happy to be a part of it.
Now we're going to make you work right away. The first item that comes up is to discuss board meetings. And so this is business of the board. And so we need to discuss several items on how to do business. I may have been listening at the last meeting. I know that Michelle and Eileen remember that we talked about with the procedure that we've been doing with Zoom meetings and doing virtual meetings. We've had to put in place a policy which does not have the normal public participation at our meetings. So we have been accepting or reporting on emails and information that we've gotten between meetings. I have not received much this time. I did have someone who asked to take part in public participation for this meeting, assuming that we would have an in-person meeting. And I informed that person that we would not, but that they could send me the subject if they wanted to. I have not heard, so I don't have any public participation for this meeting, but we do need to discuss how we're going to continue with meetings, whether we're going to continue virtually, whether we're going to move back to in-person meetings, how we're going to do hearing of the public, and possibly schedule a July meeting depending on the need of the board as we begin to discuss the financial future of the district. So I'm opening the floor to discussion. We do have a meeting already next week. Our first work session in June is June 2nd. And then we have a meeting scheduled for June 23rd. And I'd be interested in hearing board member opinions, board member thoughts on what we do with our meetings going forward.
I think regardless of the format, whether it's online or in person, we definitely need to figure out a way to incorporate the hearing of the public and public participation piece. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like right now, but I know with technology there are options.
Other thoughts?
I'm going to ask David to chime in as well on that thought. If we continue in a virtual setting for the near future, is there a mechanism to incorporate live input from public who wishes to be part of the hearing of the public?
To speak confidently that, Eric, I think that we would definitely need to do a little bit of research. I'm part of a group of technology coordinators from across the area, and I know that, school districts are all making these live meetings happen. So either through Zoom or through another mechanism, I'm sure we can find something. I think it would just be a means of making sure it's the most accessible and user-friendly function, but something we could definitely start to look into.
I might add to that just a little bit and realize that we will have differences of levels of comfort about being in person with each other. Even if we do have a live meeting, preserving whatever option you're able to come up with for a remote member of the community to come in by video, I think, especially at these times, would be very helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
I asked a colleague that had indicated I speak with area superintendents twice a week. And I asked a colleague who said they were incorporating that. And I've heard a couple of different options, but one that I found intriguing is the sign up for so normally when we're live, people would come in and they would fill out and sign that up. That they did that, they signed up ahead of time and submitted that to the board president, however, and then we could have that person call in to a separate line and have them join their speech sort of in this way with the phone. So they're utilizing that so as not to have people in the meeting and then out of the meeting, trying to join this link. So that was a suggestion that was happening with, and that was not a district near us. It happened to be somebody up near the Cleveland area that was trying that.
I believe that I have heard of meetings. I don't know that City Council has continued this, but I believe that Loveland City Council had instituted a policy or a procedure where people could send in written statements via email that they came into City Council, and they were either read during the meeting if they fit the time frame, or they were read into or incorporated into the minutes. That doesn't allow for any questions on the part of board members to get additional information live at the meeting, but it does allow for voices to be heard and then perhaps answers to come or information to come back in another form after that.
Yeah, I would also, I just looked, I think we have 106 viewers on YouTube right now. And if any of you that are watching from the community have some ideas and suggestions on how to manage this kind of a thing, I think we'd welcome it. I think what you're hearing is a strong interest and willingness to get these meetings as open as we can get them.
And I think it's worthwhile too, just building off what Kevin said. I know at GE they use Slido, which is relatively inexpensive, and they do have, I think, a free level as well where you can get questions from the public live during meetings, and I'm sure P&G uses something similar. So we have plenty of resources and people out there who, like Kevin said, we'd like to hear from. And I realize I'm frozen on the screen here, so sorry.
Elaine, can you repeat the name of that?
It's,
Tool?
yeah, it's like slide, but with an O at the end. And I played around with it a little bit the other day. But I know during meetings, when they have large meetings or virtual meetings, that is what they use there.
So Kathy, I think you started this even mentioning next Tuesday's meeting and whether we want to do that in person or virtual. Are we set up in, I guess this is the library room that we hold the meetings in? Are we set up in there for social distancing, or will we have a limit on how many people we could have in the room?
So one of the things that we talked about in preparation to support your discussion here is because we have an unknown number of attendees at any time, I believe we could create social distancing for a large number of people, but then you would sacrifice the ability to hear the work. So, you know, an option would be a hybrid option would be that we, as a board, an administrative team could be live and then just live stream that meeting. But that would not solve the hearing of the public portion of it. With an unknown number of attendees, it becomes challenging to know how could. Again, I think we could be prepared to distance a fairly large number of people. We could even move into a different venue to distance people, but we'll sacrifice the ability to actually hear the work.
Amy, is it fair or even possible then to ask if people would like to attend that meeting as part of the public, that a reservation in advance would be required so that we know how we're going to set up?
Amy, could I offer thoughts on that?
Sure.
My thoughts on reservations are a little problematic for a public meeting if they are open to the public. And then if we take reservations and we have a member of the public who comes and we've met our limit of people and then we have to turn someone away, I'm not sure that's following the letter or the spirit of the law to allow public participation or hearing of the public if someone gets turned away because they didn't know they needed to do a reservation.
That's my concern is if you're open, you're open. We don't want to have a capacity where we say, but not you.
Well, as much as I agree with that, we're unfortunately saddled with the fact that we're required to do some degree of social distancing. So we can't necessarily have meetings like we've had in the past in the near future.
Right.
How would the auditorium at the high school work? Wouldn't that give us, we could do every other row with different things. We could be up on the stage with plenty of feet between us all. And I think would the auditorium give us the space that we need so that if we got 150 people, we could accommodate them?
I'm going to end that with question mark. I mean, we can certainly look at that. And then the sound system there's a limited number of people who can operate the sound system at the high school. So it becomes just a staffing.
Sam does know how, just an FYI.
Could I make a suggestion? And I'm not trying to stop discussion at all. Obviously, we're talking about next Tuesday for our work session. And our work session does not include hearing of the public. I am adding an extra glitch into the, and it's fine, however we work this out. Next Tuesday, I will be out of town. I have a family medical situation that I need to go take care of. And so if there were to be a in-person meeting next Tuesday, I would not be able to attend the meeting from a distance. I could listen in via phone, but I could not participate. If the board were to, even if they met in person next Tuesday, have a Zoom meeting where they are all on a Zoom meeting, even meeting in person, then I could join that meeting via Zoom and we could all be together, and that meeting could be streamed fairly easily. The other question about streaming an in-person meeting, no matter where we have it, if we have it in the auditorium, if we have it in the media center, we need someone to film it and someone to stream it, and we need to be careful of the setup that we do so that it's getting out there, as well as these Zoom meetings happen to be getting out there. I mean, we did this sort of out of necessity, but I think we've hit on something that does allow quite a few people to participate in the meeting that didn't necessarily come to in-person meetings before. So that's a good thing about having this Zoom meeting. Kevin, I see your hand raised. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just going to suggest that Tuesday is going to be here in the blink of an eye, and I'm going to suggest, from a practicality perspective, we do another Zoom meeting like this, and in the meantime, get some research done on what both technology and physical space options we have available to us, so we are a little bit better thought out to change the format of the meetings after Tuesday.
That sounds perfect.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And that way we can hear from people and think through all the different options and check out the technology piece.
And one other thing that I would ask board members to consider as you're thinking about for next week and for the end of June, possibly we are in a better situation to keep our June business meeting via Zoom as well, thinking of a different way to handle hearing of the public within a Zoom meeting, and make sure that whatever setup we have for in-person can start either in July if we have a meeting, or in August, when we'll have a little better idea of how we're going to go back to school, how we're going to be using the buildings, that kind of thing as well. I'm not saying that the June 23rd meeting needs to be a Zoom meeting. I'm just saying that may be something that the board wants to think about as well.
Well, one of the positives in this is that we may find a way to open up meetings to broader public permanently through what we're able to learn through the adoption of this technology.
Good point. Anything else on how we're going to do meetings? The question of scheduling a meeting for July came up because I believe that, if not the main topic of discussion that would be on the agenda next week, next Tuesday, at least a very important topic will be the financial situation of the district and consideration for future financial needs of the district. And so, depending on how the board discussion goes and what a board decision might be, there is a possibility of needing a July meeting if there is consideration, particularly of a ballot issue in the future. I believe there's a date in July that we would need to meet. Would it be possible for board members to select a July, Mr. Hawley, we would need a July meeting and an early August meeting, or 2 July meetings if we were to propose a levy?
Yeah, so we could also do an early August meeting. It just might be a good idea just to make sure that we have at least 2 dates in July, just to cover all options.
Are board members comfortable with looking at their calendar and being prepared next Tuesday to set those dates?
Yes.
Rather than spending a lot of time this evening looking at calendars and haggling about who's going to be where, if we could put that as the first item on the agenda of next Tuesday, is to think about dates for future meetings.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to talk about board meetings? Mr. Hawley, Dr. Kraus, did we cover what we needed to as far as the administrative needs would be for meetings?
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, yes.
Okay.
So to summarize, you'd like us to look at potential options to sort of business as usual in a pandemic, trying to have an in-person meeting with people there.
Yes.
And then some things in between. And you're also going to, can you share with me if you get individual suggestions from community members, can you share that with Kevin and I so that we
Absolutely.
can incorporate that into our, and we can try to have some suggestions and some ideas by the 2nd. I agree with Mr. Doherty. I can't imagine trying to pull that off by Tuesday, but I think by Tuesday we could at least say, you know, here are the barriers to some of that, and here are some options that we could do fairly easily. I can't promise that we'll have that all sewn up by Tuesday, but it seems reasonable.
Okay.
I think I just have one more thing to add, and I apologize. If I remember correctly, the guidelines from the state of Ohio are still not to have gatherings of more than 10 people. I don't know how that will affect this.
That is true, but for business operations, as long as you can socially distance, if we don't think of ourselves as a school and we think of this as a business meeting, there are opportunities to do that within, you know, we can defer to that guidance. I mean, additionally, that you, as you bring up, our buildings are technically closed until June 30th, but as you may or may not know, athletics are starting. If you are not paying attention, you only know that if you're not paying attention, because athletics is starting. So our facilities are being used within reason on that too. So, you know, the state is trying to chunk this out and, you know, and do things that make sense, but sometimes they conflict on each other. I do know that the city, excuse me, City Council is also trying to figure out how perhaps to have their June meetings live and in person and with socially distanced opportunities for guests to be at those meetings. They've not solved that problem yet, but they're in the same space we are exploring that.
Great.
Okay, thank you. We have a little bit more board work to do, and that is to talk about board committee assignments. And those committee assignments are listed under board docs under 2.2. We have a facilities committee, we have a finance committee, we have a policy committee, and a student experience committee. And I believe at the current time, what you see there is the current board member assignments for those committees. So Ms. Pettit is facilities, Ms. Pettit is finance, I am on the policy committee, and Mrs. Washburn is on the student experience committee. That's not to say that they have to stay that way. That's just who is currently on there. The other issue is we don't necessarily have to have 2 board members on each committee. We have typically had that. That's a good idea. If there's a committee meeting and one board member can't make it, there is always a board member who can be there, but it doesn't have to be that way. I always joke that nobody's terribly excited about policy. And I think in the way that we are operating for the rest of this year, we have some very important issues before the district, and that is operating in a pandemic or coming out of pandemic operation, that is financial operation. There are some things that are pretty important, and policy may get relegated to working on the policy that simply has to be taken care of based on the things that we're doing. So it may not be as big a job as it usually is. We have typically tried to be a little proactive and go through policies and say, we need to look at these, let's look at this group, see what needs work. But so if there isn't anybody clamoring to be on policy, I am okay to stay on policy by myself for the rest of this year. We would reorganize again in January. So if you choose a committee and you're not happy with it, we can do a sort of a musical chairs when we get to January as well. But if I could ask Kevin and Eric to perhaps give us an idea what committees they would like to participate in. And then we can see if we can get everybody organized into committee assignments.
Sure.
Can I say
Betsy, we also have, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I want to say a quick word of clarification about the committees. The committees are administrative committees in order to bring board members along on specific items within around these ideas. So in order to sort of expedite board time, it's an opportunity for 2 board members to explore a little more deeply on the administrative side on these topics. I mean, moving forward, different committees could exist. These are just committees that help us, share just more information than might, be appropriate or from a time perspective with the whole board on all those. So, areas that you have a greater interest in understanding sort of in the weeds, in the details around some of those things are opportunities for you to spend time on the administrative time or on the administrative side for you to understand those a little bit differently or better, and then help bring the rest of the board members along with your additional knowledge. So that's sort of the purpose of them, just to frame some of that. And I'm sorry, Eileen, I cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't raise my hand first. I was going to say we also have the committee, the Oaks committee that Dr. Lorenz is on, and then we need to talk about if we want to change or if we want 2 people for the community committee.
Oh,
The Planning Commission?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Right. And we certainly can have that discussion as well. The Planning Commission bylaws as they stand, which I don't believe they've been adopted by the Planning Commission yet. The way they currently stand, it says there's the board president and a board member would participate not as a voting member in that commission. But certainly we can talk about that as well. That's true. Okay, now Kevin and Eric.
Eric, did you want to go first?
I don't have any strong preferences, Kevin. If you have one or the other that you have a preference for, I'm happy to serve in any of the others. And quite honestly, I can learn about all of these things. So I can't attend every single committee meeting, but it would be valuable for me to be on all of them.
God bless.
Okay, I have Eric's name down on all the committees.
The schedule is simply the schedule that was provided for you is simply the schedule that the board last year adopted for this year, and I asked Julie to roll that forward. We can change and alter when those committee meetings meet. Don't let the times and the dates deter you from your area of interest. That's what was there before, and that's to get us started. But don't let time or dates deter your interest.
Dr. Lorenz or Kathy, if that's okay, do you
Yes.
prefer right now to try to do more than one board member on each committee?
If board members are able, I think that it is good to have 2 board members on each committee if they are able. And that's why I was simply volunteering that policy might be one that stays single, because there are at least 3 holes. So that means that Kevin and Eric, you would need to one of you would need to do 2. So I didn't want to impose on new board members that you have to do 2 committees. But I think it is good if we have 2 members on each committee.
Well, if we can continue with 2 on the planning commission, I would be happy to continue with, lean on Kevin if he feels comfortable doing 2 of these other committees, and I'll pick up the other one.
Yeah, I don't, Michelle, were you trying to get recognized?
Yes, I just wanted to say I am on the finance committee, which I am more than happy to continue serving. But if you 2 are interested in it, please don't be afraid to speak up and say you want to be on that, because it would be a great opportunity for you to learn about school financing.
Yeah. So the way I've thought about this is where I think I could add the most amount of value. And coming from where I come from, I have had an interest from the very beginning in finance. If there was a need to have some additional input on facilities, I'm happy to lend a hand there too. A lot of background in both of those areas. So, and those are probably the 2 that I'd add the most to.
I will say that very often there's an attempt to have the finance committee and the facilities committee meet relatively close together, so that you don't have to come to 2 separate meeting times if you're on both of those committees. Eric, did I hear you say that you were interested in serving on the plan as a representative to the Planning Commission?
Well,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead, you finish.
And then another committee. Is that what you had
Well,
said?
Exactly. So I had participated with Eileen in the first Planning Commission meeting, and it sounds like that will take some amount of time. I am more than happy to fill any of these roles. Michelle, if it's okay with you, one of my interests is finance as well, and I think I can serve well at that, but I certainly don't want you to feel like I would want to bump you out of it.
No, I got on the facility or on the financial by default. There were 3 of us. So yeah, I somehow got on by default. I could make the meeting times. It just was what it was. So it will not hurt my feelings if the 2 of you would like to do that. I think it'd be a great opportunity for you.
That sounds good. So then if I read that correctly, we'll have Michelle and Kevin doing the facilities committee, Kevin and I doing the finance committee, Kathy staying with the policy committee, Eileen staying with student experience, and then Eileen and I, or if anybody else wants to participate, can work with the Planning Commission. I feel like there's one that we're missing that wasn't on that list.
We talked, Eileen mentioned Great Oaks. The Great Oaks representative from the board is actually appointed, the way the legislature works now, is appointed for a 3-year term. And so that is taken care of at the moment, although there's nothing to say that we couldn't appoint someone else to that. We can discuss that at a future time. We don't have to do that this evening if someone else wants to be the Great Oaks representative. The other thing I would suggest at this point is that I would ask either Michelle or Eileen if they wish to serve on either policy or student experience, so that we have perhaps 2 on student experience, and again, 2 on policy if you'd like. Or I can just read all those policies and proofread them and bring them to you and say, here they are. So Michelle, perhaps we'll ask you what you would like to do, since you've bumped yourself off of finance.
Well, I've been on a student experience and I really like it, but I will not be able to make that 4 to 5 time. And I know Eileen needs to make the 4 to 5 time. So Catherine, I'm not very good at proofreading, but I would love the opportunity to learn more about policy. I cannot believe I just said that.
I can't either, but I wrote your name down, so you're stuck.
Right, I'm in.
Eileen, are you okay on student experience for right now? And if I can, I will join you on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then what I have written down is Michelle and Kevin, facilities, Kevin and Eric, finance, Michelle and Kathy, policy, and Eileen and maybe Kathy, or Eileen and a floating member to a member to be named later, a draft choice to be named later. And then at another point, we will confirm the planning commission members once the planning commission works on its bylaws. And we'll confirm who's going to, be present at those planning commission meetings. And the Great Oaks, we can discuss at a later time. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
All right.
I do want to point out, I really appreciate the fighting over the finance committee. That's the most I've seen. Typically, it was usually Mr. Jarvis, and then
Crickets.
yes, basically.
And then me by default.
We're here to help.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys just made Kevin's day.
Yeah.
Finance is so exciting. We keep telling
Yes.
Kevin it is so exciting. We are very happy about that.
Yeah.
Okay, is that okay for board meetings, committee meetings? And as Amy said, all of those committee meetings are negotiable for when they occur to get them into people's schedules and when they are able to attend them. All right, then we will move on. There are a couple of board resolutions. The first board resolution is to elect a vice president of the Board of Education for the remainder of 2020. And so I will open the floor for nominations for vice president of the board.
Kathy,
see
can I-
Eric raising- Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I've read this and I just want to make sure that I understand it and hear it from somebody who knows, somebody maybe on the policy committee who knows it. What exactly is the role of the vice president of the Board of Education?
Right. Very simply, to do it really fast, both the president and the vice president of the board are simply individual members of the board. Each board member has a voice. Each board member has one vote. The main job of the president and then of the vice president in the absence of the president is to make sure that the meetings run smoothly. So they are a meeting facilitator. At times, the board, the president is asked to be the voice of the board if there is a statement that is made to the public. Very often, the media contacts the board vice president, and if they are unable to be in contact with the president, they contact the vice president. So those are the two main things for the president and the vice president. In recent past, what we have done, the charge for the president is to set the agenda for the meetings. And so the board president meets with those administrators that are able to tell the board what things need to be on a meeting. And so then we work out the agenda that way. In recent years, both the board president and the vice president have attended those meetings to make sure that we have all the voices that we need to be heard to get on the agenda what the board needs to deal with. So those, I would say, are the main things: to run the meeting, to serve as a voice for the board if a statement needs to be made to the general public or to the media, and to help set the agenda for future meetings. Does that help? Kevin,
Great.
I saw your hand.
Yeah, just Kathy, just a quick clarification in setting the agenda. Board members, I assume, have the ability to say there's a topic we'd like to add to it, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, we occasionally have input from the public who is able to contact either the board or the administration and say, here is an item that we would like to hear the board discuss, and we are asking that it be added to the agenda. But absolutely, board members can suggest items at any time.
And I'm assuming that everybody knows this, but again, we're up to about 130 people witnessing this meeting, but there are email addresses on the Loveland School website for all of us, I think.
Yes, and I believe there is a link there still. Now, Eric and Kevin, have you gotten your Loveland School email addresses yet?
Yes.
So I believe there's a link there that we can all be emailed at once, or we can all be emailed individually as well.
Very good.
I'll double check and make sure that the group email is updated and accurate. That doesn't happen by default, so I'll check with technology to make sure that if you're emailing all 5 board members, you are actually getting the 5 of you.
Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, so once again, I would entertain a motion to, I would entertain a nomination for vice president.
I would like to nominate Michelle Pettit.
I hear Mrs. Washburn nominating Michelle Pettit. And we don't need a second for a nomination. Ms. Pettit, would you accept that nomination?
I would.
Are there any other nominations? I
Well,
see Ms.
I'm
Eric.
going to make this challenging because I can say very clearly, and I think Kevin may feel the same way that I do, I am not prepared for that role. And I would nominate Eileen, who I think would do a wonderful job.
Okay, there's also a nomination for Mrs. Washburn. Eileen, would you accept that nomination?
Yes. What I'm hearing Eric say is that we should not nominate him.
Yeah, is there a little bit of a delay there? So,
Yeah, that is what you were hearing.
all right. Any other nominations? All right, then I would entertain a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
And I see Eric, I almost tried to write on my iPad there that who seconded or who made that nomination. I'm in bad shape this evening. Okay, so we do have, we need a roll call vote to close nominations. Mr. Hawley.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetsonow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Motion carried. Nominations are closed. The way we have handled this in the past when there are 2 nominees is to go through a roll call vote with the board member stating the name of the nominee that they are voting for. Is that an acceptable way to do it?
Kathy,
Kevin?
Kathy, I don't know if this is out of sequence now or not, but being very new here and not knowing everybody very well, if there's a chance to hear Michelle and Eileen speak for a couple of sentences about why them?
Absolutely, that's not out of order at all. I'll go in order of nomination and in order of alphabet. Michelle, would you like to speak?
Sure. I would like to be the vice president. I feel like I still have a lot to contribute over the things that we've learned the last few months. I have also been on the board for 6 years. I do bring some experience. And I would just like to be able to bridge that gap between the board and the community and get things to where they need to be so that we can educate students.
Okay, thank you. Eileen.
All right. I feel that I would do a good job as vice president because I just lost all of my words. Sorry. You ever have one of those moments?
Sorry to do this to you,
Look
by
at
the
the
way.
new guy putting us on the spot.
Sorry about that.
I feel like we are obviously in a difficult position right now as a board, and we really want to work hard to repair our relationship with the community and be able to move forward to do what's in the best interest of the community, the teachers, the students, the faculty, everybody involved. And I haven't really had much of a voice up until this point. And I think as vice president, it would give me the opportunity to step up and be able to be that voice, and similar to Michelle and everybody else sitting here, help bridge that gap that exists currently.
And I think I
And
have
now my screen is frozen.
No, you're good. I think I have one more thing to say before we vote. The reason that I nominated Eileen after Eileen nominated Michelle was to express the fact that I, as a new member, feel both of you would be excellent in that job. And no matter who takes a job, you're going to both do a great service for our community and for me over the course of the next year or so.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Is it acceptable to the board to simply state your vote, the name of the person you are voting for? The only other choice I think would be to have a vote for each person separately, and you would say yes or no. The result would come out the same, I assume, but I just want to make sure the board is comfortable stating the name of the person that they are voting for as vice president.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that nomination then? Oh, I'm sorry, we need a no.
No, there's two motions. I think we're fine.
I've got the second motion. So the motion is to appoint, and you would name the person as vice president of the board. Sorry.
All right, Dr. Lorenz.
I get to go first, right? I agree with Eric that both of these women have shown themselves to be very good board members, and it's a very hard thing. You all will, I don't know. I will vote for Ms. Pettit.
All right, Ms. Pettit.
I will vote for myself, Michelle Pettit.
Dr. Swetchenow.
I would be happy to vote for Ms. Pettit.
Mrs. Washburn.
I will. My mom's going to be mad at me because she told me once in 5th grade when I voted for my friend and not myself that you should always vote for yourself, but I'm going to vote for Ms. Pettit.
And Mr. Doherty.
Am I in the enviable position of having a vote now?
Yes.
I'm going to vote for Eileen just to recognize her selflessness.
Thank you.
Okay, then the motion carries with Ms. Pettit being vice president for the rest of 2020. Congratulations, Michelle.
Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations, Michelle.
And thank you all for your comments. I do know that we all have a big job for the rest of this year. One of the first things that this board will be discussing is communication and how we all begin to bridge this gap, whether it's as president of the board, vice president of the board, committee members, individual community members. We have a lot of work to do, and that's one of the top things on our agenda, is to make sure we get that communication where we want it to be. So thank you all. I think that we have finished the board work, and we did it in less than an hour. So that is all the board things we have to do.
Planning, you have to appoint.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry, I missed one. I was looking at 2 different places for the agenda. Thank you very much. The last board resolution is to appoint members to the Planning Commission. And so I will make the motion to appoint members. And then if there is a second, do I see a second? I see Mrs. Washburn seconding that motion. I would like to read those members who are on that motion. We did invite these members. The Planning Commission members have all received an invitation. I believe they received both an email invitation, and I believe that Mrs. Washburn called every one of them to confirm. So they all know that they are on the Planning Commission. They have actually been together in a Zoom meeting that I believe Mrs. Washburn and Dr. Schweitzenau attended. So they have been made aware of the things that the commission needs to do. This is the official appointment of these members, and their names are Janelle Otten, Daniel Coletto, Bradley Combs, Susan Craig, Kelly Deere, Bradley Goldie, Tara Hamilton, Matthew Hammer, Jeff Hawk, Leah Jewell, Jill Jones, Kevin Kimnock, Al Kressler, I can't say Alvin, Craig Lewis, Nathan Libby, Lynn Mangan, Kirk McCracken, Lisa Moorhead, Lynn Ori, Lisa Saletta, Michael Shaversky, Alexander Topala, Lindsay Willman, Warren Winning, and Natasha Young. And they were all invited to listen in on the meeting this evening for their recognition as becoming initial members of the Planning Commission. And they will begin their work June 3rd. Is that correct?
Can I give a quick summary of that?
Yes.
Would that be right? And then Eric and Eileen can chime in if I miss anything, if that's all right.
Great.
Because they weren't an official commission, and because they're chartering this commission, I invited them to a pre-organizational meeting so that it's hard to just create yourselves out of nothing. So we had a meeting last week where everyone came, got a chance to say why they wanted to be on the commission and just sort of see people's faces. What they will do is at their meeting on June 3rd, they will elect a president or right away in the agenda. And then I will hand off that agenda to that president to run those meetings. So I ran this organizational meeting. It's not an administrative meeting that this group will exist on their own. But in order to charter that up, we needed to get that started. One of the tasks that commission will have to tackle on that first meeting is the Constitution and bylaws that Dr. Lorenz just mentioned. And it sounds like we will want to change that language in the bylaw that says 2 members appointed by the board, or that without putting a clarification of a president or vice president, that would just be 2 members of the board as appointed by the board, if that's okay with the board. The other thing that they will do is the terms of being on the commission are 3-year terms. And much like the board, in order to stagger those so that you're not looking at an entire new commission or a group at any time, those are in 3-year terms. So I did ask each member of the commission to fill out a quick survey of what's the subcommittee they wish to serve on as their priority, and what term are they willing to take, a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, so that initially we can build in that stagger. The bylaws do say that people can serve multiple terms, so a 1-year term does not mean that that person would not come back. It just means that it puts us in that staggered. And then I will provide that feedback or that input from those from the commission members to the president, and the commission can determine how to proceed with that. So I have tried to organize the information so that the commission can create themselves next Wednesday. Those meetings will need to be public, so they will be live streamed. Once we figure out how we're going to do board meetings, we'll have to also figure out how to do planning commission meetings. But those, because they will be a commission of the board, they will be subject to the same rules and regulations about being meetings in public. So the commission will have to work through that a little bit too. Everyone was excited to be a part of it. sort of eyes wide open, making sure everyone understood what they were signing up for, and they had some great discussion. So the bylaws that will be presented to the commission will have a show edits, things that came up either in the meeting or in feedback after the meeting to me will be presented back to the commission as potential edits that the commission can adopt. Eric or Eileen, do you have anything else to add to that meeting or that summary?
No, I thought it was a very positive meeting. I look forward to the work that the commission is going to do. When you were talking about how it would still kind of be governed by the laws of similar to the board meeting, I thought that a lot of great discussion was already occurring about how to incorporate public voice and opinion into that, so they can then bring that to us, and we can try to act on their suggestions. So I love that that was probably the biggest focus, I would say, that night, in addition to getting to know people. So that's just really, I think, positive.
I agree.
Well, and I can easily add, there is a lot of positive energy amongst those people. And, some of my main goals right now are transparency and communication. And I think that having that many people focused on those same goals will be really helpful for all of us in order to make sure that we don't miss any voices in the community, that we're not talking to the wrong group of people, but to the right group of people.
Kevin.
Just in the interest of transparency, can we understand how the members were identified, selected?
Absolutely. What happened was the board determined back in December, I believe, to set up this commission. We'd been talking about it prior to that, but it was December when we sent out, I believe, a call, and we received applications from community members, and we did a blind review of those applications. They came into the administrative office, names were removed, identifying features were removed, and each board member evaluated each application. We had a rubric that we followed, looking for community influence, looking for a variety of experience and expertise that these members could bring to the commission. And so the 5 board members each came up with a score according to the rubric for the applications. And then after we had put them all in order, that's when we learned the names of who these folks would be. And we asked Mrs. Washburn to contact the first, now my numbers are going to be off. We took applications from staff as well as community members, and we had determined we would have 7 staff members, and I think we were originally going to have 16 community members, and we determined based on the number of applicants we got and the scores of them that we took the top 18. So Mrs. Washburn called all those folks and asked them if they were in fact still interested, and they all accepted our invitation. So that's how we came up with this planning commission.
So we started with 23 applicants, and did I understand that right? We ended up with 18 commission members?
No, we had more than, did we have 32?
38.
38. I couldn't remember the number. So the top 18 out of 38.
So about half were
Yes.
selected.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And did I hear in the discussion, I only had one question, the commission has not yet been asked or talked about the different committees or the different parts of the commission that they would take part in. In other words, they are just being brought into the commission as a whole, but it was part of the plan that there would be smaller working groups for particular questions and issues for the district.
I did ask each of the commission members to send me just through a simple Google form what their 1, 2, 3, what their preferences were. with the ability to say, like, I'm putting a 4 on 2 of these. I'm just really not interested in that. Or, there was some flexibility in that. And to also give their input on their willingness to be a 1-year, 2-year, or 3-year person. So that is all coming into me. I haven't looked today to see how many that we have. But that way the president, the commission will have that data already for that evening so that they can work through how to determine that happened.
Okay.
It seemed reasonable to be able to provide that ahead of time to so that the president could preside over those decisions and the commission could make up their mind.
I agree. I think if I recall correctly, we had a lot of people who were interested in finance and fewer in some of the others, just as our new board members are interested in finance. A lot of the community is, and rightfully so. It is a very important issue at the moment. But if you're going to have a small working group, you can't have the whole commission work on one thing. You want to get some different kinds of feedback. So I will be looking forward to them organizing that.
I glanced at the feedback. I do not have everybody's. It looks fairly well balanced. I think it'll shake out all right, and the commission will be able to manage that without too much trouble.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? That was a long discussion for this item, but I think it was a good discussion. Mr. Hawley, I believe we need to vote on those appointments.
Yes. Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Absolutely.
Mr. Doherty.
I'm going to have a lot of problems with things like this as we go along, because I don't know these people, except for maybe one or two of them. I am comfortable that it was a reasonably sound process to select them. And on that basis, I will vote.
That was suspenseful, Mr. Doherty. You froze up just before you said your vote.
Sorry, yeah, froze up here. But I said yes. On the basis of a good process, I said yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. I think that's all of us now, right? Motion carried. Now we'll move into the recognition portion of our meeting. Dr. Kraus.
So every quarter, every grade level in the district selects a student to be recognized for My Voice, My Choice. It's a campaign that has been, gosh, I don't even know how long it's been going on. It's certainly part of the culture here long before I arrived on the scene. But My Voice, My Choice is focused on children, teaching children, encouraging children to be part of a positive school culture. It's related to our bullying program. We talk about being an upstander and stepping in when you see something that's not right, about being a friend, about reaching out to students who may not be asking for help, but it's about inclusion. It's just all the great qualities that you hope that as a parent you would hope to hear about your child. So we recognize students quarterly. We do that typically at halftime of athletic. We do a football game in the fall. We do a basketball game. I think this year we did a soccer game. So we do those, we recognize those in public. And the fourth one is always at our board meeting. So normally we get to see their faces, we get to meet their families, and we get to congratulate them for being just good humans and just really important part of school as learning those things. So So right now, while you can't see them, I know that many of those families are watching this. We invited them to watch for this recognition. And Jamie Gordon is sort of the chair of this, and she has put together a short presentation to recognize each of our My Voice, My Choice honorees here in the fourth quarter. And we start with our littlest Tiger Cubs and we move right up to high school. So Mr. Knapp, can you play that link that's in the board docs for us?
Hey, Loveland Tigers. Did you know we have some pretty amazing students doing some pretty amazing things to make this world a better place? Well, we do, and today we celebrate them. The My Voice, My Choice campaign is focused on creating a positive school climate for all students. Specifically, we are calling on our students to stand up for their peers through their words and actions. Today, we are recognizing students from each building who embody the principles of My Voice, My Choice. Thank you for all you do to make Loveland a better place.
So normally we would have them up and they could get their certificate and we could clap for all of them. And so I hope they're all watching with their parents. So if we could just clap for all these great kids, it's so nice to see them, and I miss their little faces so much. So it's great to see their pictures. So if you're watching, students, these are the things, school is so much about academics and making sure that you're doing your homework and trying your best. All of those things are really important, but almost more important, but for sure equally important, is just really being kind and making sure that students feel included and that you're a positive member of our school culture. We are so appreciative of you. I wish you were here in person for us to shake your hand and to hand you your certificate. I know that you've gotten those certificates. And to the parents, thanks for raising great little people and sharing them with us. So it's such a pleasure to be able to take a moment to recognize people for being just good citizens and really helping our schools be better. So
Amy,
all of their names are also attached to the board agenda for people to see if they missed it in the video. The link is yours to share with their cute little faces.
Yeah, Amy, I just got to tell you, I watched this the other day. I just loved it. I think there are 34 students on the list by my count, and unless there's siblings there, we've got 68 parents who had a role in creating these, this wonderful caring attitude, which is so needed out there. I'm just very, very proud of the young people that were just showcased, very proud of the parents, and a big shout out to Jamie Gordon for putting this thing together. Well done, nicely done, thoughtfully done.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you.
Kevin. Thank you all. Amy, I just wanted to say, as you did, when we see them in person, it's always been great to be able to shake their hands and see these young people who are going to be future leaders and very kind, thoughtful future leaders. Actually, seeing them on the video this time was probably better than in person because we all would have had to have masks on and we couldn't have shaken hands. And so we got to see all those beautiful smiles. So thank you very much.
Well, my favorite part about My Voice, My Choice is I like to say our bench is deep. We do not have to work hard to get the nominees. For a year hardly seems enough. Maybe there's repeaters, I don't know, but I certainly have never noticed a repeater. So our bench is deep and with great students, and it's a pleasure. So thanks to the students who are watching right now for being a part of this.
Okay, and I think we also have retirement recognition this evening, right, Amy?
I do, and I'll let Robin pop in on this one. Typically in real life, we would come together, we would invite our retirees and present them with a gift, and their supervisor, their principal would say a few words about them because it's this way. We are going to, individual supervisors are going to, we're going to go out in a little pack like you've seen the schools do to do recognitions and deliver some of those things, but I'll let Robin speak a little bit to the list, even though they're not here for us to celebrate their service and our gratitude with them tonight. You're on mute, Robin.
I'm challenged with that for sure. Okay, so we don't have that many on our list this year. This includes anyone who retired from last June clear through now. So it's not necessarily just those from this school year. So that includes, we have Luann Downey, who was our registrar. She was with us for 4 years. In transportation, we have Bill Carrier and Al Fay, who were drivers for us, and Robert Johnson, who's a mechanic. At LECC, we have Joanne Homan and Mary Rose. I have to do a big shout out to Mary Rose. This is 41 years. She has been with us, been with the district, and that's amazing. We had a great time honoring her at the opening day, and I think she was a little embarrassed that day. We have Bobby Stecky from LES, and from the intermediate school, Colleen Betts and Helen McCune. At LMS, Susan McConney, and from the high school, Pam Baumat and Dara Hudson. And we wish we were able to have some cookies and refreshments and to let the principals shake their hands, but unfortunately not this year. So we thank them for their years of service.
Thank you. I think I added it up. I think it's 248 years.
Wow.
I'm not sure if my math was right. The virus may be causing my math skills to drop right now. But.
Mary,
Well,
excuse
Kevin,
that.
can't you do that in your head real fast?
It's
Kevin Howard?
262 years, but who's counting?
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, I missed somebody then. I will just say that normally board members get to hand plaques to people. And so we often have fights over who we're going to get to hand the plaque to. So we have to negotiate that very carefully. We always want to be able to honor all these folks who have worked for Loveland all these years, and we really do appreciate them. So thank you.
I would just add that, you know, for many of these people, it's their life's work. Or half their life's work. And it's work that's had great meaning. And I think we're all very appreciative of the service that you've all rendered. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think we are moving on to the next portion of the agenda. Just for the point of information for our newer board members, we have in this section board reports, and those are all reports that are in, board reports. They are from the superintendent, the treasurer, the chief information officer, Department of Teaching and Learning, the business manager, and principal reports. And they are all included in board docs for your ability to read those ahead of the meeting. We have reports during the superintendent and treasurer updates where they give reports. But if you have any questions or any comments on any of these reports, you are welcome to add them at this point. It is just not a time when someone is going to be reading their report to us. So does anybody have any questions or discussion? There's a lot of information in those reports.
Kathy, this is the whole 5 section that you're talking to right now?
Yes, yes.
So I had maybe a couple of questions, if I could.
Absolutely.
I guess it would be 5.4, teaching and learning. We begin references to remote learning. One of the questions I had was our ability to support students with remote technology. Are there any gaps that we're finding with students, any issues that, you know, from a resource perspective that we're having, or are we able to support everybody?
Yeah, hi Kevin, great question. David Knapp here. I'm happy to speak to that. You know, as we've gone through this, and we're what, about 2 months in, 2+ months in, it's definitely been an opportunity to better understand and become familiar with the needs that exist amongst all of our students. You know, when we think about typical access to technology, over the past 4 years, we've made a pretty significant investment in our technology infrastructure. Starting with the Tiger One to World program, which has allowed us to, over time, establish those opportunities for students to have access to their own technology in grades 7 through 12, and then to have classroom-based Chromebooks in our elementary grades, pre-K to 6. So as a result of that, going into remote learning, we were very prepared. 7 through 12, all of our students already had their own device. Even those students who are in financial need, those students had been provided a device prior to that through the school. And through that process, we were also then able to identify we're up to about 450 students now in grades pre-K through 6, to those families who said we could really use some support in either getting a single piece of technology for our house, or we have multiple students doing remote learning at home and we may need an additional Chromebook. So we think about that through the device piece. And actually, Ohio Department of Education is working through our local ITCs, and those are the organizations that provide technology support to schools. We work with a group called SWOCA. They're working with those organizations to establish needs across the state as it relates to this. So actually, we just did a pretty intense kind of data analysis within our own organization. So these numbers are kind of fresh with me. We've got about 10% of our students of our 4,700 plus students needing financial needs to a device, and about 2% of those students needing access to internet. Again, because of our investments leading up to now, those internet needs that had been identified for schools, Loveland has provided a mobile hotspot that attaches to their school device that allows them to gain access to the internet for their education. And we've actually been able to identify through this process about another 35 students that now have access to internet at home for remote learning purposes as well.
So if you were to summarize, does every student, I don't know if my connection looks like it's coming in and out, but would I leave this conversation thinking that every student has been cared for with respect to technological access in a remote learning environment, or are there gaps that still need to be filled? And if we do have gaps, do we today have the financial resources? And if we don't, you don't have to do it right now, but maybe you could tell me what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah, I can. So speaking to the gap specifically, I can tell you that every effort has been made for outreach and connection with families by way of getting those devices and resources for those families that we've identified. Kevin, I would say if there's any gap, it's simply in identification. As you know, we make those efforts for outreach and those pieces, and when those needs become known, those families we provide devices to. So I can't say for certain that we have 100% access out there, but for those needs that are known, we've definitely provided 100% of those needs. If that helps to clarify.
Okay, very good. I just, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. I just, you know, I'm not somebody who thinks that remote learning is perfect and the answer, but it clearly is going to be an answer with what we and a lot of other people are going to be doing in the future. And if we don't have the tools in place, you know, we're not able to serve the young people here. And that's just trying to get to that point. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, Kevin, did you have other questions?
I do. I don't want to dominate this, but I do have a couple more. Do you want me to go ahead or just let somebody else?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So this one might be for John. With the high school busing elimination, how do we feel about the parking capacity at the high school, assuming that we'll have more young people driving to the campus? And just from a practical perspective, the families that now will have to provide to get there, I guess freshmen and sophomores at least, to school. How are they going to do it? Are we able to help them in any way, et cetera? And are we getting feedback about it? I'm not revisiting the busing question. I'm visiting on kind of the ramifications of busing reductions.
Okay, it's twofold. One are the parents, the students who need to have a ride from their parents to the school. I believe I provided each one of you a drawing, our first attempt to make student drop-off a functional, a well-oiled machine, and it's being vetted by the high school. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. Am I still on? Does anybody see me?
Okay.
Okay.
You're coming through. It's just a little lower quality.
Okay, so yes, we have, we're working on the methodology to get the parents in and out very quickly with the drop off of students. And at the same time, we are working on providing a sidewalk from Rich Road sidewalks up to the school that will be a safe sidewalk. That sidewalk connects over to Phillips Park. A number of our students use Phillips Park. That parking lot comes and goes depending on time of year. In the fall, there are not a whole lot of kids driving or wanting to drive, but as the year goes on and kids turn 16 and parents get cars, then the parking lots become much fuller in the spring. So we're working with the city to make sure that the Phillips Park parking lots are available. The city has permitted us to use both parking lots on Boyke Park next door to the high school. And we are working with them to identify other methods to make sure that we get our students up there in the safest and just the easiest manner for everybody. There are no more additional parking lot or parking spaces at the high school. It is landlocked, and the high school manages parking passes. So I try not to step on that, but as I say, the city and us are working diligently to try to make sure it is a safe method, and actually met with Police Chief Ray the other day just to make sure that what we were looking at doing fit what they expected us to do. So we're all working
I
together
what
on
you've
that.
done. I saw the diagram, seems to make a lot of sense. I just worry maybe a little bit, but wonder about parents that are at home saying, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get somebody to school? And whether we've got any ideas about helping them, making connections, whatever it's going to be. Maybe there's no answer for it tonight, but it's just one of those things that I wonder about, helping prepare the community for a change like this.
Yeah. The city, I mean, we've talked about a number of ways to make it safer. And they are just very on board with whatever we can do to make it work. And I think we found that the first 2 weeks of school are, no matter which building it is, are very troubling, just because there are so many new people in that facility that have not been there before. They don't know the traffic flows. And the city permits us to use their traffic officers and our SROs to help get the flow moving in the correct direction. And then once everybody kind of learns how it works, then it goes much smoother. So the first 2 weeks are always very interesting.
Everybody looks frozen on my screen, so I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Okay, I see both. Oh, okay, there's Kevin. Eileen, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, my
I've got
internet is
3
very
screens
unstable tonight. It
frozen
keeps
now.
freezing up on me.
There's Eileen.
Okay, so I'll say mine to see, and if you can't hear me, I guess I'll repeat it in a minute. So I have a comment and a question. My comment would be kind of going off of what Kevin was talking about as far as helping families out. Kevin, I have a son going into 9th grade next year, so I know the lack of busing is not ideal at all. And it's a conversation we've already started to have, and I also teach in the Lakota School District, which had to eliminate buses many years ago. So I have witnessed that year after year, the struggle on the parents' part. And what they do there and what I've started to do here is just lots of networking and carpooling and starting to have those conversations within communities of who can help out where and when. So like I said, it's not ideal, but I guess it's kind of where we are with that. And then my second thing is for John, as far in regards to cost for the sidewalk. Oh, sorry, my internet says it's unstable again.
I have not started, well, I received a quote a number of years ago to do the sidewalk. And it was, my memory is $22,000. This one will be a little bit more complicated because we're having to cut into a little bit of a hillside to make it come up on the north side of Tiger Trail. There's a significant rise in elevation, so it'll be a little bit more, but I'm going to say probably $25,000 to $30,000 to do that sidewalk. We are putting
And
it
what
6
fund
feet
does that
wide.
come out of?
That will be out of the PI fund.
Okay, that's what I was making sure of.
Yeah, that's all PI fund. And the reason we're making it 6 feet wide, I don't know if you noticed the drawing, so that if we do have a snow, we can run the snow plow truck over it rather than trying to do it with a tractor or something. So we'll be able to plow it quicker. Typically, we just try to make the sidewalks wide enough to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right.
Eileen, the point that you were
other
raising
board
is
board report.
I think Kevin is trying to talk, but kind of freezing up a little bit. Or I'm freezing up.
yeah. Why don't I just stop on that subject and just say kudos to the LECC group. That art show that they videoed was wonderful. I was a parent at home. I would love seeing my child's artwork, and it was very sensitive to go through the whole population, I guess. So whoever did that, thank you. And whoever came up with the guest Pledge of Allegiance announcers at LES, also nicely done. I think it's a way to personalize something that's become this video world a little more impersonal. So thank you, whoever did that.
Kevin,
Great.
which art
Thanks,
show was
Kevin.
that you were referencing?
Anything else on the reports? Sorry, Amy, I talked over you. Say that again.
I just was curious, which art show was he referencing? Which school?
I think it was at the kindergarten building. They had videoed the hallways that had all the individual pieces of artwork hung up. It looked like hallway after hallway, and they did the whole place. And just a thoughtful thing. And John the other day took me on a tour of 5 of the 6 buildings. I think some of you know this. And there's just evidence of human touches in a lot of different places. I was in some classroom, I don't remember which building it was, John might remember, but there's curtains on the window. And my bet is that the district didn't pay for those curtains, but a teacher somewhere along the line, had it in her heart to make this a warmer place. And with everything, and I mean, I'm sounding a little touchy-feely right now, and you're going to see the other side of me when we get to the money issues, but I never want to lose sight of the human beings that are putting their heart and soul into the mission of caring for our young people. So just thank you.
I appreciate the shout out, particularly to I would say art and music and PE have, those are really unusual positions. Not that remote learning was easy for anyone, but those groups have really worked hard to try to engage the kids. LACC is John Hentz, that's the teacher there, but they, to a person, really worked hard to try and engage people and showcase our students' talents outside of the academic. So we appreciate the notice. Our staff has worked really hard at that.
You mentioned PE, Amy. I did appreciate the virtual field days that happened. Those were pretty creative. and interesting. So that's another kudo to the PE department.
I saw broken eggs in people's front yards. I saw all kinds of things. Good stuff.
Yes.
And Kevin, I did ask Jen Soren, the principal at LES, if she knows all of the people that she recruited for the Pledge of Allegiance at LES. And if so, I told her I wanted to hang out with her, because that was very cool.
Be nice
Yeah,
to
there are some
Lauren. She
pretty
is
recognizable names on that list. Yeah, very good.
Oh, for sure.
I'd like to apologize to our audience. I'd like to apologize to our audience on YouTube if you're seeing the same thing that we are seeing with screens freezing and having a little trouble with conversation. So we probably will move on ahead, if it's all right with the board, and move on to the superintendent update. Dr. Kraus, you are frozen on at least my screen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're not moving, but I can hear you.
Okay. Maybe I'm just very stiff. All right. I have two things. One, we'll just transition right into celebrations. We talked, the administrative team talked early in remote learning about how do we make sure that we work hard to make sure that we do the celebrations and the recognitions and the closures for students, even though they're remote, that those are just a real priority. And, you know, we turn people loose, and you have seen the evidence of some of those things. There were some drive-bys today where people said goodbye. I saw people with their windows painted when they came to say goodbye to teachers, you know, really trying to create that end of school feel. I want to do two shout outs, two smaller shout outs before I talk about graduation, which I want to talk about. One, our transportation department put together a recognition for the class of 2020, and in a world of viruses, to talk about going viral, back to the good connotation of that, that has been picked up and really shared around at a national level. What I want to say about that is that that was completely transportation driven. It was their idea, and you know, we just got out of their way. They contacted Jim Barrett, who is another person that I would like to do a shout out to. Jim Barrett is a photography teacher. He teaches in our art department and does photography at our high school, but he is also our drone pilot master. I don't know what's the right term, but he does the drone work. So, you know, they contacted Jim, and he helped create that that drone photo for them that has become so popular and that has gotten so much recognition nationally. That also goes on to Jim Barrett is a good segue into the man behind the scenes for graduation. The high school plan other. I'll talk about well-oiled machine with 392 graduates, 375 families walked through for their own individual personal graduation throughout the course of the day on Saturday. Jim is now editing that video so that next week we can have that closed captioned and out so that people can watch other students walk across the stage and get some of that experience. You'll see some of that drone work in there. Just really an amazing day. I couldn't even begin to start the list of people who contributed to organizing that, but the high school took that challenge on, and unbelievable. I got to be part of that all day. And it was so wonderful to spend those moments with every family of graduating seniors. And I took one bathroom break and washed my hands quick and did not miss a family. And it was so wonderful that I didn't look to see what time it was until 7:15 that night. 12 hours passed and I didn't even notice. That's how great it was. And I don't know what time the last graduate went through. I'm going with 8:30. There was a little rush at the end because we had a little lightning storm coming up. So we rearranged to get some families in, at least staging them in. You know, families waited in a queue. The outside staff cheered them on. There was a celebration while they were waiting in their cars. When they parked and they entered, they were able to go through the giant inflatable tiger that we use for athletes. And there was a photo op. They came in, there were photo ops along the way, where they then got from us we checked their name, and I delivered them to a teacher who delivered them to Mrs. Chast, but who delivered them to Mrs. Johnson, who escorted them for them to have their own individual family graduation with the stage. And it was, we sanitized, I think Kelly Partridge might have sanitized the stairwell, 375 times. And then they went through and got their diploma and turned in their cap and gown. And it was a great day. And I know that the tradition of being together was something that people lost, but I believe that what they gained was, you know, some special moments with families. It was a great day from beginning to end. So I don't know that any of you got to participate in that, but I hope that you heard some of the wonderful things. Certainly Twitter and Facebook were a buzz with the day. Does anybody have any questions or comments about how we were able to honor our graduates this year in this unusual situation?
Just wanted to get ahead of time with keeping things running and bringing them back a great experience for families and students working within the constraints that we
and so
were
on
dealt.
their behalf, I did.
So
I'm not
I don't
sure
know
what's
what
happening
happened,
with our
but
connections
about
here.
72 people all just think I'm seeing that Zoom is having a national issue, and so we're just the lucky recipients of that, I guess.
Yes.
So
Graduation was great. Thank you, Amy.
I was just lucky enough to participate, and the parents for their patience. It was amazing. The other one is talking about next year. So we have asked for, a couple of things are going on in our plans. So we have a question document of, these are the questions that you have related to food service. These are the questions that you might have related to a classroom, transportation, cleaning, all these different buckets. And the teachers and the staff are adding their own questions to those. We will use those as part of planning the structure for moving forward so that we're trying to capture everyone's thoughts and questions about how next year is going to look. We have also asked for feedback from families, students, and staff about the instructional part of remote learning. What went well, what get some input into that planning. We do not have guidance for next year. We don't know what our protocols will be. We have not received that from the state. So it is difficult to be real clear about what next year will look like. But what the administrative team has organized is a team of administrators and teachers to work through some big ideas. Here's what remote learning could look like. Here's what a hybrid would look like. Here's what in-person might look like. And when I say might, I mean understanding that we don't know the parameters. We don't know if, we can sort of look at other areas of operation to make some guesses, but we don't know what transportation will look like. If we can only have 15 students on a bus, that's going to change the way we do business. If we can only have 9 kids in a classroom, that changes the way we do business. So we don't have any of that yet. So we're going to plan those big ideas, meaning we know it's in some way, shape, or form, either for a length of time or for some families, all time, a remote option. We will need an in-person option and to figure out how we would do that with distancing and masks and the things related to that. And then we need some sort of hybrid that either captures changes in what rules would be or expectations would be from the state, or captures different needs in different families. So we're trying to create some big buckets with the staff so that we can then go do work over the summer within those parameters. Once those big buckets are established, our intention is to ask for family feedback about which of those options would they take part in, so that we could begin to plan and staff for those and work through some of that. So right now we are gathering feedback. We will start beginning Monday with the work with the principals and the staff on developing those and putting enough meat on those so that we can communicate that back out to get feedback. And we will be asking for community or family interest and feedback and questions about that here in June. What we want is to be able to leave in June with a fairly clear idea of what might happen, how we might respond, how we would respond to things that might happen, if that's vague enough for you, and then be responsive enough as guidance changes over the summer. When we have talked, I am fortunate enough on every Friday morning to be with a group of superintendents, and the Hamilton County Public Health reports to us. And by all accounts, August is just too far away for them to give us any clear guidance about what things will look like. We can make some obvious guesses and start to plan for some of those. And we have pushed the ODE as a group of superintendents, have spoken with legislators and pushed the ODE to give us at least some guidance so that we can make plans. Because when guidance is restrictive, it costs money and it costs, it takes time to figure that out, so that we can provide the best education. We know that the remote education that happened this fourth quarter is the best we could do. We flipped that over in about in school world, 5 minutes. It was challenging for families. It was challenging for teachers. It was extremely challenging for students. So we know that that was not the best. It is what we were able to offer. We want to be able to create a situation where we can meet the needs of students. We had the added benefit at this point of going remote after teachers had built relationships with their kids. They already knew them. They already understood how they learned and knew how to reach out. The idea of starting remotely without having those relationships places a completely different challenge on that. So that's our plan to move forward, and we should be able to communicate that back out mid-June to families. Are there any questions about that? You're all frozen, which means I don't even know that you can hear me talking.
Amy, has the governor given us any indication when he might issue his new budget for the coming year?
The budget?
Yes.
Is that what you asked about, was budget?
Yes. Doesn't he have a new one coming out July 1st?
Yeah,
No,
Kevin might be able to better speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me okay before I start?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you're not familiar with the state budget, it's a biennial budget. So it's every 2 years. The first year of the biennium was this current fiscal year that we're in right now. So next year is year 2. So at this point in time, typically what you'll see, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the 5-year forecast conversation, but typically what you'll see is the budget stays away the same way year over year. So for your question, Michelle, it's not necessarily that the budget should change from last year for typical reasons, because it's the second year of that budget. There is a potential that it can change based on where sales tax and income tax are coming in. So they've seen through April. May is typically released the 10th. Both of those reports are released the 10th of the month. So early June, they'll have a good idea of what Opening Up Ohio at least a little bit has done for their receipts, for tax revenue. But, you know, if there's any anticipation, as we have been told at this point in time, if they are going to make any changes to next year, it'll probably be sometime in July.
Okay.
Any other questions about how we're planning for, I don't know, the permutations on this are crazy. So how we're attacking the problem is probably a better
I see
question.
Eric trying to be recognized.
Well, I'm glad that you could see me. Amy, you're right. There's too many unknowns right now, and it's so difficult to plan in an era where things can change from week to week. Is there any clarity as to what state level guidance actually means for us? Is guidance just that, and we're still allowed to make our own decisions? Or are we locked into the guidance that they provide? And if their guidance is third graders have to wear masks, third graders have to wear masks.
Yes. So there will be I don't know, must-dos, and I do know that the ODE is working with legislature to maintain local control, because we have to solve individual problems. You know, people have different resources in different situations. I mean, if you're in a rural district that has, you know, a huge amount of space, it's different than if you are in the city. So, you know, there'll be a fair amount of local control and local decision-making. The things that will not be optional will be the recommendations from the Board of Health. So that distancing, how many kids can be in a space, masks, those kinds of things. We have provided, and by we, I mean superintendents have provided to the ODE, to our advocate with legislators, to talk about some of our concerns about fully relying on the CDC guidelines. The CDC guidelines indicate things like, I'll give you a secondary example. Students should not change rooms, nor should the teacher. Well, that's a little challenging if you think about a high school schedule, and I teach AP English and you teach calculus. And if we're not going to be switching classrooms, that's going to be challenging. The guidance about wearing, about distancing, maybe we can get high school students to distance because they're grown, but I would invite you to imagine a kindergarten classroom and how that might look. So, you know, that we also have concerns about cloth masks rather than clear masks. When I think about teaching young people to read, you know, teaching children how to hold their mouth, you know, how to, you know, just to articulate, not to mention the nonverbal communication that we use with children to build culture in our classrooms. So, you know, we've asked for some flexibility. Safety, of course, is our number one priority. Of course, we want to follow the safety guidelines. I don't want you to misunderstand that I'm trying to get around those. They're just restrictions that will be challenging to overcome in order to teach children. at all different, at all different levels. But when the Board of Health, the health rules will be the mandated non-negotiables, would be my prediction, Eric.
Thanks for the explanation. I think you see much more than the rest of us, but everybody sees the problems of balancing safety and education.
Yeah. Safety first always, but I see language in the CDC guidelines that say when feasible, and you're like, I mean, I hate to say things are not feasible, but like come to a kindergarten classroom, like feasibility of, it's one thing to say we went through graduation and didn't shake anybody's hands. That's different. Kindergartners fall down. We touch children. They're little kids. We're caring for them. And that there's just some challenges that we'll have to work through. And obviously we will work through them, but there's an element of protecting children's experience too. In that it will be a challenge. We're going to start at the instructional level and really try to think about what's the best way to offer instruction in a remote, while we're here, in remote, in a hybrid. And we're going to start with just instruction first. And then as that guidance comes through, try to figure that out. We started this way with you're all remote, without any ability to really think about what that might look like from an instructional standpoint, which has been, a bit of a crapshoot. So we're going to start with our teacher leaders now about what would quality instruction look like in those areas, and how can we then support it and back into some of the safety, leading with the instruction and the students first. And, there's the social emotional needs of students. It's a heavy lift.
It is. It's a very heavy lift. And the way that I think about it is you can never avoid costs. There's always a cost. And the cost of absolute safety is removing some of the social interaction that's necessary for effective teaching. So it's a challenge, and good luck. And we're here to support you however we can.
Fortunately, we're all in the same boat. We all have our groups. I have my superintendent group, there's teaching and learning group. You heard David say there's a technology group. There's a treasurer's group. Like, we're all with our people, trying to group solve them together and share solutions to those things. Some of the bigger districts have more people to generate some templates and generate some of those things. People have been very generous in sharing. We, of course, are, we're very generous in sharing. There is an element, we are very lucky in our region about competition. Everybody wants to have great scores. Everyone wants to win the football game. Everyone wants to do those things. But when it comes to best practice and doing what's right for kids, this is a great region for us to be in. We have lots of access to partners and friends and colleagues to think in different ways about things. We're really lucky to have those consortium groups to do that with.
Thanks for the update.
Thanks, Amy.
That's all I have.
Okay. Well, then at the end of the superintendent update, there are superintendent resolutions. And this evening there is just one resolution, which is a motion to approve the board policies that are listed there. Those board policies came to the board for a first reading at our last meeting. And so this is the second reading of those policies. Is there a motion to approve those? I see Ms. Pettit waving her hand, and I will second that motion. I can report to you, as was reported when they came up for the first reading, the changes in these are, they did not even go through the policy committee. They came as legal recommendations for changes on these. It is language that is necessary to meet the state requirements for graduation for gifted education and identification, and it's not badges, what are the word, now I'm not thinking of the right word, the certifications that are able to happen, pathways to graduation. So that's what these policies are about.
The third policy is about students that are at risk for not graduating. It is a pretty prescriptive policy about making sure there's a plan in place for students who are at risk to graduate. Those were procedures and things that we had in place already at the high school. So we simply adjusted our procedures to make sure that we were matching that policy.
Okay. Any questions? All right, we do have a motion and a second, correct? I'm not losing my train of thought here. Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit.
Yes.
Motion carried. We then move in, if we're all right, moving from the superintendent portion, we move into the treasurer portion of the meeting, and Mr. Hawley's presentation on the 5-year forecast.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lorenz. Hold on a second here. I'll share my screen. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, well, thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for those who are at home watching. We are going to go over the 5-year forecast today. Just before we get started, though, just so everybody knows who's at home, the 5-year forecast is available in Board Docs, which is the online system that we utilize for the board meetings in particular. So there's a lot more detail on those. It goes through every single line item. So if there's more information that you're looking for, that's where you can look for it. As always, you can always contact me. Be more than happy to talk about the details, but we'll look at some of the high level details with the forecast this evening. First, before we just jump in, just a little bit of background on what a 5-year forecast is. The 5-year forecast is approved twice a year. It's in May and November. Although it is something that is required by the state of Ohio, it's something that we utilize on a regular basis when we look at future planning and looking forward in the future as to what we're doing in the buildings, and even when we're looking at some of the financial needs in the district. There's a lot of different variables that we utilize within our planning, and yeah, it's something that I look at on a very regular basis. November typically is more of a kickoff for the year. It used to be actually October. The law changed recently that it's approved in November, and it's more of a kickoff to look at what that year is, what we're doing that year, and the year's future. May is typically kind of just a look back and a brief look into the future. If you've been paying attention to funding in the state of Ohio, a lot of things have changed recently. And so it's gonna be a little bit of a different conversation, but we're gonna hop in here. So tonight's agenda, what we're gonna look at is fiscal year 2020 update, fiscal year 2021 expectations or forecasts, some previous forecast comparisons, and cash flow considerations. Before we go to the next slide, just so people at home are aware, or even our board members, the fiscal years for schools are July through June. So in reference to fiscal year 2020 update, we are currently in fiscal year 20, and we will be soon finishing up that year and going into fiscal year 2021. All right, so the first that we're going to look at is our review. So if we look at the review of fiscal year 20, a lot of things have changed. So obviously our buildings are currently closed with the pandemic, and that has changed a little bit of our expenses. So we're going to look at expenses first. So some of the expenses that we've been able to save are basically based on some of the building closures. So some salary and benefit line items there. We've also been able to, with freeing up some funds within our permanent improvement fund, we're able to move over some one-time expenses. And there are some future expenses that will be rolled over into the permanent improvement fund. And that's in many ways because of the recent cancellation of high school busing. Just quickly on permanent improvement, our permanent improvement fund is also funded through tax dollars. The intent of the permanent improvement fund is to take care of any assets that we have that are 5 years or longer. And it's also for any expenses in order to maintain those assets. There are opportunities within the district. We typically use our permanent improvement fund mainly for capital improvements, as Mr. Ames already talked about. Putting in the sidewalk at the high school would be something that's categorized under permanent improvements. So we are able to utilize those funds. We don't always have a balance in that account. This year we do, so we were able to take advantage of some of that extra income to help out the general fund. But it is an account that still is more restrictive than our general fund. So there's still expenses that we're not able to actually move over and take advantage of within that fund. So on the expense side, we were able to save roughly $1 million from our updated February forecast. The district actually updated our forecast in February due to the levy failure in November and some cuts, and then also some commitments that the board had made to the community. And we'll talk about those in greater depth further on. On the revenue side, if you have been paying attention as well, the state has actually cut K-12 budgets. Every district was affected differently. It wasn't necessarily a straight percentage for every district. There's a lot of different factors and variables that they utilized. And Loveland in particular, we weren't hurt the worst, but we were definitely impacted or affected more than many other districts. So currently in this fiscal year, so again, we're talking about May and June, the state of Ohio has cut our budget by just over $1 million. So if you take into the areas that we're able to save expenses versus the revenue loss, we are basically ending the year where we had anticipated in February. You can see on the right-hand side, our cash balance is expected to be just around $100,000 less than what we'd anticipated in February. I would like to say that I'm pretty proud of that fact, that we were able to get through this year with some opportunities that we're taking advantage of with current expenses, but then also some of our savings with building closures to basically end the year flat. Where the biggest difference comes in is for next year. So this is fiscal year 21 forecasted budget. One thing that I do want to say is, as we've already discussed, is the fact that we do not know exactly what the state is going to do at this point. As Amy had alluded to, we're in constant conversation with many of our colleagues, with state representatives, with the Ohio Department of Education Budgeting and Finance Department. I am personally on a group, actually 2 groups within my organization. One's an advocacy group, and one is the Ohio Department of Education Finance Advocacy Committee. So we have a lot of individuals that we can speak with and get a better understanding of, and really see what our colleagues are doing. So let's just start firstly with the revenue side. We're currently forecasting a decrease of roughly $1.5 million from what we had anticipated in February. This was not anticipated. What we're really looking at here is a few different areas, mainly is state funding. So at this particular time, I am forecasting a similar cut in state funding as we are seeing currently in this fiscal year. That is what many of my colleagues are doing, and honestly, some of them are being even more conservative on that. I've not necessarily heard of an instance where they're not at least expecting a similar cut going into fiscal year 21. A couple other places where we're seeing less income or revenue is our property tax collections. So even though we have levies that are currently being collected in the district, what we receive is based on actual collections from individuals. We looked back at the recession years as trying to do our best with historical look back. Surprisingly, in Loveland, there was not really that much of a decrease in collections. We typically see about 100% collections. We were seeing about 98.5 to 99% collections during those years. So we have factored that in for at least this upcoming year and the year after, but it's not substantially different than what we've seen, but it does impact the bottom line. The other place that we're seeing it is the district does actually receive money from casino revenue. Casinos have been obviously shut down during this time frame, so we are currently forecasting that our casino revenue will be basically half of what we had anticipated. So that's really, for the most part, what's making up that $1.5 million in revenue loss. On the expense side, what we're looking at currently is $1.7 million in savings as to what we expected in February. The difference that we see in fiscal year 21 as opposed to fiscal year 20 is that this is due to, it's in response to the failed levy. So we had a lot of different areas that we were looking to cut. Some of the places that we've talked about so far is our high school busing. So this is lowering our expenses at this point to make the budget more feasible. We also looked during our planning and budgeting stages with all of our departments, looked at other ways to save money. So there are instances where our budgets are lower than we had anticipated with the February forecast already, and also including those particular cuts. What's important about fiscal year 21 as opposed to fiscal year 20 is when you look at the right-hand side and see that our cash balance is basically $112,000 better than what we had anticipated in February. Well, the May forecast shows cuts in expenses, and the February forecast was not anticipating, well, we had not factored in those cuts specifically because we did not know what was going to occur with the levy. So although we're seeing roughly flat cash balance, it's not due to, it wasn't supposed to look like that way, basically. Ultimately, the cash balance should have had a significant increase as we anticipated our revenue to be the same pre-pandemic. So that's a really important piece to be aware of. We'll look at the future years that even though it is relatively flat, it does help out the bottom line moving forward. But fiscal year 21 is not flat because of anything we've done at this particular time because of lost revenue. If that makes sense. If you have any questions on that, well, please let me know. So what we just wanted to look at really quickly was just a comparison of fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 24. So when we're looking at the 5-year forecast, we're looking at 5 years of forecasted years. And we really wanted to look at really quickly kind of where we were and where we've come. If you just look at the November 2019 forecast on the left-hand side, it'll show our total revenue and total expenses and what our fiscal year 24 cash balance was anticipated to be at that point in time. And it was roughly negative $25 million. When we looked at the February levy or the February update to the forecast, and with the initial reductions in expenses and some additions in revenue, you will see that our final cash balance was roughly about negative $12 million. And now with the May 2020 forecast update, you're looking at about $6.5 million final cash balance in fiscal year 24. Again, we anticipated that cash balance to be far better than what it is. What you can see on the total revenue side, and this is something that we've discussed many times during the levy season, was our revenue is typically relatively flat. And that's what our expectation would be. Because of lost revenue from the state and anticipated lost revenue from the state is no longer flat. We're actually losing revenue over what we had anticipated originally. So you're looking at lost revenue of roughly $3 million, but we've also decreased our total expenses from February to about $8.6 million. So all in all, when you look at the full story of where we've come, the district has reduced expenses for forecasted years by roughly $21 million. So one reminder that we wanted to look at was the board commitment. So in February of 20, the board committed to make sure that our expenses were not increasing by more than 3% during the forecasted years. What you can see on the top is our November 2019 forecast, where we were previously. So 3.3% to roughly 4.3%. And now you can see the May 20 forecast is showing this current fiscal year is going to be just below 1% on the general fund. Next year, the bulk of the cuts occur. So you're looking at 0.32% for fiscal year 21 and still maintaining that less than 3% in fiscal years 22 through 24. I just really wanted to highlight the work that the board has done during this time to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible and making sure that we are limiting our costs. So although we've been able to curb costs and bring down that curve, this is showing just our revenue loss. So revenue year over year, you can see in fiscal year 20 and 21, that's the bulk of where we are looking at our anticipated revenue loss. So at this point in time, fiscal year 20, we definitely know what it's going to be. And in fiscal year 21, we're anticipating a significant loss from the state as well. If you look at 22 through 24, the reason why you actually see it go higher in 23 is because with the November failed levy and then the failed levy in March, we actually highlighted some places where we are going to increase revenue, and that's in line with our pay to participate fees. So you will see some revenue increase back into the budget. So one important piece that we always want to look at when we're looking at the forecast, and then we're also looking at future levies. So this is not necessarily a levy conversation because we'll have much more details in our June meeting, but this is something that's really important, and I think it does get lost oftentimes when we're looking at the school budget. So the district attempts to keep roughly 2 months of expenses, which is approximately $9 million at the end of a forecast or fiscal year. And the purpose of that is really to maintain our current obligations. The district does have uneven cash flow from a revenue standpoint. Since the bulk of our revenue comes in from the local community, it had been 58%. It's going to be more than that since the state has cut our budget. Those checks come in basically twice a year. And so you'll see that reflected in the graph. So the red at the top is this current fiscal year. The blue below that is fiscal year 21. And I believe that is purple. I apologize, I'm a little bit colorblind. So if that is wrong, you can correct me. So fiscal year 22 is that bottom line. And you can see really how money comes into the district and how money is spent. So the red line is current actual dollars, and then we're obviously doing some anticipations of May and June. July through June on fiscal years 21 and 22 are based on consistent cash flow or consistent expenses, and then where we anticipate the revenue to come in. So what you can see in January of 22, what's really important is as we're trying to maintain a cash balance, the balance gets to roughly about $2.7 million at the end of January of 22, without increased revenue and making sure that our expenses are where they are. If we do not receive, we typically do not receive our state revenue, or I'm sorry, our local revenue in January. We receive a bulk of it in February. So if there is a delay in receiving that money, it could put us in a position that is rather precarious. Our our monthly expenses in 22 are basically $4.5 million. So there's a little bit of a timing there. I think it's still doable. It's something that we would want to have much more conversations on. But I think this is an important piece to always look at, that although that we have a cash balance, it is important that we maintain a cash balance. We cannot go into a position where we're unable to pay payroll. 85% of our budget is salaries and benefits. And so that is very predictable when we're looking at our expenses. So the last slide that I have here before we just look at some conclusions is basically where we were in 2019 and where we are through our projected years. This does show the total revenue versus total expenditures versus our cash balance. So you can see in fiscal year 23, we do go slightly negative in total cash. And just as a reminder, this is inclusive of $2.7 million in budget cuts or budget movement from the failed levy in November, roughly $2 million in the March levy failure, the 3% commitment from the Board of Education, and no increased revenue. So you can see where we start to see some of the concerns on the budget side. So lastly, I just wanted to leave everyone with just an understanding that the district has made significant decreases in current and projected expenditures. As we looked at almost $21 million in savings on the expense side over the 5 years of the forecast. We did see an unexpected loss of revenue from the state. I mean, these are unprecedented times when we're looking at school funding. Decrease of total revenue by just over $3 million over the forecast. And that healthy cash balances within the district are absolutely crucial and necessary for the district to maintain our district obligations. So I will stop sharing here. I'm sure there's going to be questions on it. I can share it again if that's necessary. But again, if you have any more questions or want to dive more deeply into the forecast, the assumptions page is currently on board docs, and it will be supplied to the Ohio Department of Education after today.
Yeah, Kevin, a couple of things to start with. One, thank you for doing this. As disturbing as it is, and it should be to everybody that's seeing it right now, it's really not telling the whole story. I'm afraid that the story could be far worse than this. And I say that because I'm concerned about, broad economic pressures that are on the community, the state, the country, the world, et cetera, right? So there are significant unknowns in front of us. And, what we've got here with all the work that's been done up to this point, in any given year, we're kind of overspending the revenue that we can sort of count on at the moment. That's about the only thing that we can count on by 6-7% or so. And that's math that just doesn't work. I mean, this is a totally unsustainable picture. And we have a limited amount of time to solve for it somehow. Again, the big variable in my mind is the public's ability to help us help us do what we're trying to do here. Because we're going to run out of money soon, and we don't have a lot of opportunities to go ask for money. Once we spend a dollar, we can't get that dollar back. And we don't know what tomorrow brings. So I think that we have to be incredibly conservative in the way we spend money at the moment until we can figure out a game plan here. The worry that I've got is so we had two levies that we weren't successful with. My feeling from talking to a number of people in the community is that they kind of get the fact that The school system needs some money to keep going. The window to ask them for that, I don't know. I don't know if we're out of that window right now. I hope we're not, because solving this problem could be quite painful. And we don't have a choice but to solve it. I will say that, the good news is that we do have some cash surplus here, and cash is time, not an enormous amount of time, but it is some time for us to work scenarios that try to quantify the sensitivities, the bets that we're going to have to make on how to manage this situation. The other good thing, and I mentioned it earlier in the meeting, that John took me on a tour of the buildings the other day, and I will give a lot of credit to John and the district for being what I call excellent stewards of the buildings that we have. We have a bunch of old buildings, but they are really well cared for. And push comes to shove, we can sure live with them for a while. I don't think it's an emergency to solve that. It's something that eventually we're going to want to do something about, but we don't have that particular burden on top of meeting operating expenses right now. Although I do worry that, as these buildings continue to age, they do cost more to maintain, and whether we really have adequately forecasted, if you will, what it takes to keep them going and comfortable and safe and all of those things. So I, for one, am going to be, I don't know what would be the right word. I'm going to be pretty miserly about dollars, because these are all the dollars that we know that we have, until we know with some reasonable certainty that there's a plan to work better arithmetic than what we're looking at right now. Again, I'm not being critical of. I think you've done fabulous work here. I know how hard you're working on all this. It's just a real life situation, and we've got to figure this one out.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, so like when you look at, so for those who aren't necessarily familiar with school funding, running a deficit is not necessarily out of the ordinary. Kind of what you talked about, Kevin. When you look at the forecasted years of roughly 6 or 7% expenses over revenue, well, the previous 4 years were roughly 6 to 7% above revenue. So the revenue was higher than expenses in those years. Typically what you see, and many people have seen me do the picture, and Dr. Krause will make fun of me for it, but doing the stair-step model where, basically revenue is flat, and then what we're seeing is, you're trying in many ways is you're trying to soften the expense curve. There's not a whole lot that we can do on the revenue side besides coming to the local community and asking for them to support the district. We can do as much as we can on the expense side. What you're really looking at too is some of the bigger challenges is as a service organization, 85% of our costs are wrapped up in people, and that's what we want to do. We want to serve people, and that's what our purpose is. And those are typically our highest appreciating line items as well. And so, and I know that we have discussed it. So currently, one of the forecasts and estimates that we utilize on the benefit side is we're looking at healthcare increases of 9%. That is, we're involved in a insurance consortium. So what we utilize currently is what the actuary utilizes in our insurance consortium. So that's a 9%. If you look at many of the districts around here and you look at the districts within the insurance consortium, they're looking at something similar, 7, 8, 9% as to what their forecasted assumptions are. We had the benefit of this year of having a 4% increase. So going into next year, we're factoring in a 4% increase on the benefit side. So any decrease is something that we're able to capture those savings on. The concerns that a lot of districts I know have, especially in the last couple of years, is that increase. We saw a insurance consortium, which had roughly 100 to 150 districts in it, had an increase of 17 or 26%. So it wasn't 17 to 26. You either got 17 or 26% increase in 1 year, and how devastating that was to some districts' budgets.
My bet is that there's an enormous number of people in the district that aren't aware of the way schools are actually funded and the way levies work and things of that nature. This is a pretty unique thing. I mean, in the world of business, this is kind of strange ways to I don't know, generate revenue and et cetera, et cetera. You put a levy out there and you basically bank money for a while you're spending into it. Once you understand that, you know that a levy only lasts for a certain amount of time, because if, in the real world, if you are not doing anything different, you've got at least basic rates of inflation to contend with, right? And we certainly have many more dynamics at play here. So, but again, I'll just, I'll tell you, in my experience, there's a million stories. I mean, and they're all honest and they're all real, and they all feel unavoidable. But also what's unavoidable is when the checking account empties out to zero, and you can't pay people and you can't do things anymore, et cetera. So we have this is, you and I have had this conversation before, so I know I'm not telling you anything new here, but for the rest of us, for the public, we're not in an emergency today, but it's not that far off into the future. And we are going to have to do a series of things to get this thing to balance. And that means we're going to spend differently. It means that hopefully at a point in time, the public will understand this situation and be of a consensus to help solve it with rational levies that at least they can tolerate. I'm deeply worried about them, though. I'm so worried about the uncertainty in families across the district right now, and their willingness and their ability, even if they get all of this, can they get themselves to the point to reach deeper and help solve this, when you realize that the financial demographics of the district is varied, and the demographics in general are varied. There's a lot of families that don't have students that are serviced by the district, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of different things going on in everybody's minds. And I think we have an obligation to what I call, kind of game this out. And what I mean by that is to run scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if we do this? What if we do that? And have a range of potential scenarios that we can feel comfortable with, and we are able to have a robust, open, intensive dialogue with the community, and all come to some consensus at a reasonable point in the not too distant future.
I agree.
Thanks. Other comments, other questions for Kevin?
Kevin,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, you early on were talking about the state budget cuts that are affecting all K through 12 buildings. And you said Loveland is affected more than other districts. Can you talk about, I know it's not your decision, but can you talk a little bit more about why that is the case?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of different reasons as to what the district what the state looked at. So one thing that when you're looking at every district in the state of Ohio, there's a lot of different ways when you're looking at state funding. So there's something called a cap. So a cap district is a district that basically doesn't receive any more money than what they received last year. Or you have a guarantee district that doesn't receive any less money than what they received the year before. And then you have people in between. And if you're in between, you're what's called on the formula. The goal of this state really is to get more people on the formula, where you're being funded based on your actual enrollment. Most districts are actually on the cap or the guarantee. So there's roughly 610 to 612 school districts in the state of Ohio, based on whichever ODE report you look at. And roughly about 100 of them are in between either a cap or a guarantee. Most districts, if you look at percentage wise, are a guarantee district, and that's where we are. We're a guarantee district. But the way that they determine all that is something called state share index. They look at a lot of different things within the state. It could be a average valuation of homes in the district. It could be income related. They basically are trying to figure out a way to make state funding equitable. And many people may not know this, but when you look at Loveland, and this isn't determining your own personal case with it, but from the state of Ohio standpoint, the state of Ohio looks at Loveland as a wealthy district. So if you look at median income, Loveland is the 27th highest out of 610 school districts in the state of Ohio. And so disproportionately, when you look at state budget cuts or how the state typically funds schools, it's going to impact a district like Loveland more than others. We were not affected quite as much as some of our neighbors, but I can tell you there's a district that I do know of that basically has the same state funding allocation that we do. It's almost the exact same dollar amount. It's definitely a far greater proportion of their total budget because of the demographics in the district, so the state funds them more. But Loveland lost $1 million in state funding for this year, and that district lost $185,000. So there is disparity within the state of Ohio. We lost just over 8% as compared to some districts. There are districts in the state of Ohio that did lose almost 50% of their state funding. Those districts don't necessarily receive a lot of state funding in total, as you can imagine, but that definitely hurts when you are anticipating that funding to be coming in. So it's
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Please.
Because of our participation in the Alliance, which is our advocacy group that represents school districts more similar to us with these funding issues, has been working with the treasurers and the superintendents in districts like ours to push back on legislators on this particular issue about being disproportionately affected and in general. So it's not a matter of just sitting back and taking it. It is, we have certainly aligned ourselves with other school districts in a similar position with an advocacy group to try to change legislation around that.
Yeah, and so, and even what I say in this particular case, it's not fraught with feelings or things like that. It's just the fact that typically in the state of Ohio, what you see is the state typically funding lower poverty or districts similar to that much higher. So, I mean, just even a little background, I was in a district that had very high poverty 6 years ago, and they had a substantial amount of increased state funding to the district. And that's not something that Loveland was able to be a part of. So it just looks very different across the state of Ohio. Did that answer your question, Eileen?
Any other questions?
I have just a little bit of, and more of a way that we need to think about this. And I want to highlight a couple of the numbers that Kevin gave us. If I remember correctly, about 60% of our funding, Kevin, is locally raised by property taxes. About 85% of our expenses are personnel. And we're right now on the tail end of a levy where we're in deficit spending to the tune of 6 to 7% per year. And we'll, based on your projection that we currently have, run out of money in January or February of 2022, which is only a year and a half cycle away from now. Is that a pretty good summary of what you've shown us?
Yes. Yeah. The only thing I would just say about January of 22 is it's getting close to that. I don't necessarily think it's impossible to get over that bridge, but it's getting fairly close.
Well, and the way, and not to belabor the point, but there's only two ways through that. One is to make our expenses less, and one is to increase our revenues. And the community has recently told us that they're not ready to increase our revenues. So it's our job as a board and as a school district to get the message out about why these things are important. How great are Loveland schools? What opportunities do we offer the children in order to make them productive members of our society in the future? And how low can we cut our budget before we start taking away opportunities that will forever change their ability to be educated? That's more for us to all think about, where do we cut and how do we come back and ask for money? I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to even bring up, if you think about what we've done so far, and I'm not sure how the community looks at it. I know within the district, I know with the board, we definitely look like we definitely feel like we've made some significant cuts in the budget on a revenue and an expense side. And I know it's not unilateral that you just look at expenses, you just look at revenue. It's really a body of work. But if you look at what has accomplished so far in the district, basically $4.7 million to the positive, our current expenses over revenue is roughly 3.7 million. So in order to get to basically flatlining that, if you're just talking about an expense side, you'd have to do almost 80% of what we just did, which, Amy could speak to this far more. I'm just the numbers guy. But I think would have a significant impact on how we do business and what we provide to our students.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on the 5-year forecast presentation?
Just one question for Kevin. What's the impact of us not approving the forecast?
Yeah, so the state of Ohio does require a forecast to be done in May. So it does need to be submitted by tomorrow. Obviously, we didn't anticipate all the things that were happening with state budgeting, but at the same time, it did help to be able to get as much clarification as possible. Although it is approved twice a year, it can be updated and resubmitted, and that's what we did in February. So we made significant changes, we updated it, and we resubmitted it. So to answer really briefly, we would be non-compliant if we don't approve a forecast today.
And the deadline is now?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, anything else? All right, then what we would do is move into the treasurer's resolutions. Included in those resolutions is that 5-year forecast that we've been talking about. But there are also items of board meeting minutes, the regular monthly financial reports, transfer from the general fund to the turf field replacement, and contracts with Hamilton County and Warren County educational service centers. So those are the treasurer's items. There would be one motion to approve those items, 9.1 through 9.6. Is there a motion to that effect? I see Washburn making the motion. Is there a second? I see Ms. Pettit making a second. As we talk about those items, first I'll ask Kevin, do you have a report on any of the items? I'm assuming that your 5-year forecast report is that's completed for that portion, but do you have a report on any of the other items that are in your agenda?
Well, I'd be happy to go through them, especially with Kevin and Eric being on board here, just to give them more familiarity as we go through it. So 9.1 is our approval of our Board of Education minutes. So just like today, we have an agenda. I keep the minutes. One piece of my job that people aren't necessarily familiar with is I'm the recorder for the Board of Education. So if I am actually not here, you have to vote somebody in as treasurer. So you can all fight for that at a future date, potentially. So it's just approving what we did and making sure that the minutes are correct. 9.2 is a 5-year forecast. So we'll skip over that for right now. 9.3 are our financial reports, our invoices, transfers, investment of funds that we give on a regular basis. The financial packet that is in there is something that I put together manually. It's up to date through April. It's actually very reflective of what's in there is what's called the SM2M. The SM2M is up-to-date information as well. What I try to provide to you is a lot more detailed data as to cash flows, how we are currently hitting our budgets. What you'll see in there right now is the budget from February, so it's not reflective of this current forecast. And if we do approve the forecast, that will be changed for the next meeting. Our rev sum is basically revenue within the district. Our check register are all the checks that were actually cut for just that month. And the check pay are our current outstanding checks. So checks that have not been cashed at this point. Again, the SM2M is up-to-date information data for the general fund, and it looks very similar to what the 5-year forecast looks like. And what we call a FinSum or financial summary is all the funds within the district. So our general fund is our main fund, which is funded by mainly tax dollars and also tax dollars through the state. But it also shows other funds like our bond retirement fund, our permanent improvement fund, our activity funds, our athletic funds. So there's far more funds in the district than just the general fund. 9.4 is the approval of the transfer from our general fund to turf field replacement fund. So this has been occurring prior to my time in the district. I don't recall the exact date as to when the football field was turfed. So it is not grass. It's what people might call girth. I hope I don't offend anybody who's in the business by saying that. But basically what we do on a regular basis, on an annual basis, is transfer money towards the eventual replacement. John could speak more to the upkeep on a regular basis and what current warranties we have on the field, but that $20,000 is only specifically for the replacement when the life of the turf is done.
I could add at this point, so it's clear, that money is because when the field was turfed, then it was determined that since we would not be maintaining a regular earth field, we did not have the expenses of the lining, of the replacing of sod, all of those kinds of things. And so in order to plan for the eventual replacement of the turf, we determined an amount of money that each year would be put into the turf fund that would have been spent on maintenance of a typical kind of field. That way we didn't come to a point when the turf field needed to be replaced and we had to come up with that money.
Thank you, Kathy. So 9.5 and 9.6 are approval contracts with Hamilton County ESC and Warren County ESC. If you haven't really been in the school world, you may not necessarily be familiar with ESCs. They're educational service centers. Typically, they are county-based. In many ways, they kind of work like a private industry, even though they're in the public setting. So I actually started my career at Warren County ESC. What they do is they provide services, typically special education services to the district. And Eric, are you still on the call here? Maybe this would be a good time just to kind of give a little bit of outline of what those are.
Sure, I can speak to those specifically. ESCs were established several decades ago, initially to allow local school districts to pool resources for services that typically would be very expensive if trying to do them individually. So there are multiple benefits financially for partnering with ESCs for those types of services. in addition to some other benefits that we would receive for being able to do so. For example, with many low incidence needs that don't typically appear in very many students, for example, hearing disabilities regarding vision, those sorts of services, it would be very expensive for you to hire your own audiologist, your own teacher of the visually impaired or hearing impaired. What you could do is partner through an ESC to purchase a portion of that service at a much reduced cost. So we partner for those types of reasons when we have the need for services that we don't require full people for, which would be almost impossible to be able to purchase. Additionally, partnering allows us to participate in consortiums where we share resources and share access to professional development or cutting edge types of services. For example, we partner as a community for assistive technology supports for students who might need evaluations or support for school teams in how to utilize communication devices for students who are nonverbal, as an example. We partner with a consortium for English as a second language to have access to research and guidance and how to best support those students. Eileen can speak to that a little bit as a DSL teacher. We also partner for a cutting edge guidance and professional development for preschool programming, which is a very compliance-based endeavor where you have to achieve not only rules through the Ohio Department of Education, but also through Jobs and Family Services. So there's a need to have somebody who specializes in those types of things. Some additional reasons why we go through ESCs, it allows us to not only attain highly qualified or highly skilled individuals in areas such as hearing, vision, audiology, speech language pathology, occupational and physical therapy, but it allows us to do so in a way that's very flexible. So if our needs change during the course of the school year, we can quickly add additional supports through that consortium model. So if I need one additional day of occupational therapy tomorrow, I can get that versus having to go out and trying to hire somebody for one day, which is almost impossible. Additionally, we have access to supervision and professional development through skilled individuals in those specialties. As an example, I'm a school psychologist, but I'm not the most skilled to be able to evaluate what good communication or OTPT services might be. So having access to somebody that can help with that is important. And then finally, the long-term cost savings that we achieve by working through ESCs. As staff age and work their way up in our pay scales, they become much more expensive versus working with ESCs. We have some flexibility that helps offset that. So the types of services that you see largely in those contracts are those types of services. Additionally, there are those occasional students who might need a specialized program that we cannot offer in a local school district. For example, a separate school that would provide highly skilled and specialized services for students with autism and social communication needs, or schools for students who need very structured behavioral mental health supports that you can't effectively and reasonably do within a regular school context. And that's something, as Kevin spoke to, working with an ESC, I had once been a principal for one of those types of schools. So I saw the benefit of being able to pool as school districts to support that environment where we couldn't necessarily have a whole separate program for one or two students of our own, if that makes sense. So those are really the reasons why we go through ESCs for all of those different components: the cost savings, the skill, the flexibility, and the ability to provide structured supervision and supports to assure that we're really getting effective services for our students.
Eric and Kevin, can I ask a question? We
Yeah.
have contracts coming up with Hamilton County and Warren County. Is Claremont County not part of that? Does that come up at a different time?
Claremont County, the last we partnered with them was probably 4, maybe 5 years ago. I had some interpreter services for a high school student who was deaf. So we had an interpreter with her. It just depends on the student needs that present themselves and the ability of each of those service entities to meet those needs. We partner with Hamilton County as our primary service provider, but we have access to all of the ESCs, even beyond Claremont County. It depends on who provides the most effective service for the best cost, but then you also have to consider having staff that have been with students and teams for several years, knowing those students, knowing those families, knowing the needs, that's irreplaceable. So I can't necessarily move all of my OTs and PT from Warren County to Hamilton County because the devastating impact that would have upon student supports would be insurmountable. You would not be able to replace the student knowledge and the institutional knowledge that those providers have. So we're sort of entrenched in the relationships we have for the different types of services, but occasionally you do have a unique service that comes up that Claremont County might be able to provide that wouldn't impact some of that student and service knowledge that we have internally.
Yeah, and one piece that I just wanted to point out as well. So through the levy process, and especially after the November levy, we were going to reduce our Hamilton County ESC contract by roughly $172,000. And just wanted to make it really clear that although we are renewing this contract, it has decreased substantially and it has increased more than $172,000. So just so there's not any confusion, if somebody sees this contract and thinking that we're doing something that we had said we were not going to do, we did fulfill our obligations on cutting costs with Hamilton County ESC.
And those were largely from the gen ed curricular side, that was necessary. The special education side, ESCs actually operate sort of on multiple platforms, one being typically special education, which is where the initial model for ESCs came from, but then there's also that curricular and educational administration side as well. So most of the cuts that we had promised and fulfilled were from that curricular side, not necessarily the special education side, which we wouldn't be able to do without those services.
I think you have a very difficult set of challenges there. These are the most vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very sensitive subject.
We do have ways that we as well help support the cost of those services. We do receive some federal funding, although it's probably only about 10% of the total cost for those services. Most of the funding comes locally. There's also avenues by which we can recoup some funds through Medicaid billing, through the Ohio Medicaid school program, one of those,
Yeah.
As well as a unique legislative process that we refer to as catastrophic costs for students who cost an excessive amount to be able to educate. We can recoup a part of that back. And then as well, when we have students who are foster placed to us, we can bill back to their district of residence for some of those services. So we try the best we can to pool and recoup some of those costs.
Yeah, it'd be a subject for another day, but I think everybody knows that my wife and I are heavily involved with trying to help kids on the spectrum when they're done with high school and they're in college. And, we witness the challenge that young people are coming out of high school with nevertheless, right? So it's a very important area. Again, subject for another discussion. I don't have any issue with what's going on with this right now.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? If not, I think we might be ready for a vote on those treasure items. Is that correct, Mr. Hawley?
That's correct.
Okay, can we have a vote?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
I'm going to vote no. And it's only because of the 5-year forecast being bundled in here. I'm fine with the rest of it. If for some reason the motion fails because of that vote, maybe there's something that we can do to unbundle and get the rest of them moving. But my issue is not about the 1-year forecast or the 18-month forecast. It's about the 5-year forecast. I just have a great deal of difficulty saying that that's the future, because it won't be the future. I don't see how it can be the future. So I'll leave it there and see where the vote turns out.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
I have one other thing to add. Did we actually move to make this vote?
Yeah, the move was before I started talking.
It sounds good. I share Kevin's concerns. I have a slightly different opinion in that I believe that a budget forecast is a budget forecast. And I think all of us know that things will be changing over time. I feel comfortable voting yes with this.
Thank you.
Okay, motion carried. We then move from there to the items under the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And so there are 2 items there. I will ask Mrs. Wiley if she has any additional report. She has provided a report to the board in board docs, but do you have anything to add to that report, Mrs. Wiley?
I do have a couple additions to the agenda that are highlighted in the administrative content of the agenda in yellow. So we had a few things come up after the agenda went live to you the other day, and that was the addition of some credit recovery for Drews Mitchell to do summer school. There was also an additional football coach and some stipends from Miami University that came through for cooperating teachers that housed our student teachers through Miami University. So those were additions. Are there any specific questions about any of the items in? Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
Are we still sticking with the policy that our coaches should be 4 years out of school?
That's been practice, not policy, is my understanding. However, that is a good question. I don't know the ages of the coaches. I relied on the athletic director's recommendation. So I can check with him.
We probably should check.
Okay, I will do that.
I would just like to make a point of information that maybe nobody remembers except me. Within this set of recommendations that we will have a motion on soon is included the renewal of administrative staff for the 2021 school year. And so we have there are some changes in administrative assignments, but there are also contracts for administrators who are staying in their current positions. And I believe that normally at this time, we would also have, because our administrator handbook includes our salary schedule and would include any adjustments to that salary schedule by a vote by the board. I just want to make sure it's not here in this. And so I wanted to ask you to comment on that, that there is no change to the administrative contract.
That is correct. Normally at this time, you would have gotten a revision from the handbook that would include a recommendation for salary increases on a percentage basis. And we did not bring that forward to you.
But like in the financial stand situation we were in, that the board needed to review that, and given the change in the board, we wanted that to pause.
So the board, if I'm understanding correctly, the board could consider that and could ask for review of the administrator handbook and make changes. But voting on this issue tonight, voting on these administrative recommendations for personnel would mean that there are no increases to administrator salaries. Their contracts are being approved, but there are no increases in salary, with the exception of those who might be moving to a different administrative position. But those who are simply having contracts renewed are not experiencing any change, any percentage increase.
Yes,
that is correct.
Can I clarify a point there? If I was to look at the 10.1 attachment, do we know what the net cost differential is of this packet? Is it neutral or positive or negative? Do we know?
As an entire package, because that is it. Well, as an entire package, there would be, I would say it would be an increase, and Kevin would definitely be able to speak to that better, but the teacher's contract is in the middle of a negotiated agreement that has a 2% increase in salary for this coming year. You will enter into negotiations for the following year. So there is a 2% built into the 2020-21 school year, and then there'll be contract negotiations with both classified and certified. So the classified negotiated agreement has a 2.5. That is all of our food service, transportation, all of the classified personnel, and the teachers, certified staff have a 2% built in for this year.
And am I correct, Mr. Hawley, that's a forecasted increase? If there's a positive number there, it's part of the forecast. In other words, it's not an unforecasted increase. And it's a little difficult to look at the whole package if you're talking about some remain the same, some have an increase. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, even if you look at the forecast, it's going to be difficult to see what the total increase is because we've made cuts in personnel at this point in time. So you can't look at the forecast to extrapolate that. So if that's a number that you would like, Mr. Doherty, I can look into getting that for you. I don't have that off the top of my head. But
why don't we see where we end tonight?
I'm sorry?
I said, why don't we see where we end tonight?
Sure.
Additionally, Mr. Doherty, the contracts that are being approved for teachers specifically do not include any staff member that's on continuing contract. So this attachment does not it does not identify every teacher in the district. Those that are on continuing contract are not represented here. And administrators are on a 2-year contract, and so some are up, some are not up.
Correct.
Some are in the middle of a contract, some are new. So because of the way contracts work, this attachment would not be representative of staffing.
So I'm sorry. So going back to administrative contracts, I apologize for being so clueless. I see 3 main groups of employees, and tell me if this is correct. There's teachers, there's classified employees, and there's administrators. the teachers and classified employees are on contracts that essentially renew at the same time across the board?
No, they're on different, they're on different cycles. So teachers, some teachers get a 1-year contract, some get a 2, some get a 3, depending on how long they've been with the system, their experience, their evaluations, their work in their buildings, a wide variety of things, the collective bargaining agreement. So if they're up for contract, if their contract is expiring, then we bring forward a recommendation for an additional contract.
And when,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, when we renegotiate contracts with the teachers union as a whole or with teachers as a whole, how does that then affect each individual contract going forward?
It will affect the percent raise that they would get. So if you negotiate a contract for 1% raise, when their contract comes up, or that each year then is a 1% growth on a contract.
Perfect.
So, I mean, essentially, go ahead.
I said you've explained what I need to know.
Okay.
Now, how does it apply to the administrative contracts that we're discussing right now? Are administrative contracts also negotiated simultaneously going forward, or do we have 30 different contracts with 30 different people that have to be negotiated individually?
We only have we have 2 unions. So there's the classified union, the teachers union, those are contract negotiations. Our administrators are not a member of a union, so we bring that to the board for recommendations for increases if we feel we need to do that, or if the board would like to entertain the notion of giving raises to the administrators. There's also, we do have a 4th group. We do have another group probably for another day to explain all this, but it's the exempt staff. So our school psychologists, our administrative assistants in the buildings or in the central office, board office, those folks who are privy to confidential information that may not be a part of a union, they are called exempt. And so they are kind of like administrators. We bring forward a recommendation for you to consider to increase their salary. If you do not make a motion to increase the salary for exempt or administrators, they stay flat.
And what we're discussing today is keeping the salary flat and not making a recommendation for the few administrators whose contracts are expiring.
Well,
Yeah.
It would affect all of us. I mean, no matter who is on the administrative team, they would not receive there will be no salary increase. Based upon today, there will be no salary increase recommended for any administrators.
Individual contracts, Eric, individual contracts follow, they refer to a salary schedule. So if I'm in the middle of a contract and I refer to a salary schedule over here, when that salary schedule changes, my contract adapts to that salary schedule. So they're separate in that way.
Perfect. And then so the second side of a contract referring to a salary schedule is also the benefits associated with the position. How are those, when if ever do we discuss that?
For
benefits would be discussed, you do a collective bargaining agreement with your unions, and it would be a discussion, I guess, about administrators as a whole when you talked about the administrator handbook. That be accurate, Rob?
Yeah, there are pieces and parts of that that are in Ohio Revised Code as well. So we would, there is a little bit of guidance provided through Ohio Revised Code for what those things look like as well.
And my point is, it's very hard as somebody who's walking in today to say, oh, sure, okay, great.
Understand. Typically, we don't, that you've walked into the absolute largest personnel agenda of any month of the year is May, because that's when we do all contracts recommendations. So it is unfortunate. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've got it all. Yep.
Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Other question?
Maybe one for Amy, but this is a complicated little package here. There's a lot of moving parts to it. And it's hard to digest everything that's going on there. But if I just want to make sure that the administration really, really, really wants to do this. If you had a future where there was no levy this year, there was no levy next year, and Kevin's given us a little bit of insight into what that looks like financially, would you be making the decision now to do what you have in this package? I'm asking you for, to make a call based on a theoretical context.
I'm going to answer the question that I think you're asking. So if I miss the mark, then re-ask it. So when we are looking at our teacher recommendations, these are the recommendations for individual contracts are based on teacher evaluation and recommendations from our principals. We have already managed we've already made the staffing cuts related to the failures in the levy to manage into the reduction moving forward in the forecast. So the answer from the teachers is yes. Classified, same answer. We've already, fortunately with certified staff, classified staff, we were able to manage many of the rifts through attrition, meaning people left or retired or resigned, so that we did not have to reduce in force as many as we did the teaching staff. The administrative recommendations represent a reorganization of our administrative team to accommodate 3 administrative cuts due to the levy failures. So we are not replacing at this point a minimum of 3 administrative positions. This is a recommendation to reorganize the team that we have here in order to maintain the quality team members that we have and reassign them to roles within that so that we can keep our team together. So 3 separate answers with all of them, but yes, I would recommend that in light of the forecast, and that has been an ongoing project between the administrative team, particularly Kevin and I, for the course of the year.
So if we're sitting together this time next year, and we are looking at a very difficult financial situation, every bit as bad as it is right now, and probably worse. Again, I'm giving you a hypothetical.
Yep.
We're sitting together May of next year. Are you going to feel okay that we made a yes decision on this today, or do you have any shred of concern that you might sit there a year from now and go, God, there's some of that I'm not sure I should have done? You feel that strongly about it?
I do feel strongly about it. I feel like we worked very hard as an administrative team and as a board to identify the cuts in case of failure ahead of time so that we could continue to provide safe schools and provide a level of service to our families and our students that we were able to maintain. Now, given our financial picture, we make that next level of cuts, and I'm not sure whether it was Kevin or Eric who brought it up, but how do we maintain what we want to provide to students, and what does that next level of cuts look like? That becomes a much larger discussion about, we start to make, this many cuts or start to look for this amount of money. This is the impact on student achievement and student supports that we'll start to experience. Because you're walking in on May, these conversations have gone on throughout the year. So by the time you get to May, it's not surprising that this is where we are. And we have made those adjustments throughout. So I do feel very confident about the recommendations that are before you.
Yeah, I appreciate that this has been going on for some time, and I'm just a different set of eyes that are looking at it. Just my experience, as I said a while ago, once you spend a buck, you don't get a chance to get it back. And that's just the world that, I'm familiar with. And I want to make 100% sure that you guys are, 1,000% convinced when you're about to spend $1 that you feel really, really good about spending that $1, and at least until we have a plan to, that we're all comfortable with, that we can see fiscal stability down the road with. So, I mean, to me, this is, I'm trusting you and saying, your call here, because I can't read the detail. I can't assess the detail in this. It's administration's call that this is the right thing to do, given the fiscal situations that we're all dealing with right now. And if you're comfortable with that, I'm with you. But if you have a shred of doubt about it, I'd urge you to think more. But I'm going to go with you on this, so you tell us.
Feel confident. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? I don't see any hands, so I will make a motion to approve the resolutions, including resignations and employment of certified, classified, homebound, substitute, and supplemental positions for the 1920 and 2021 school years. Is there a second?
I'll send it.
Oh, Michelle is waving down the screen at
Sorry,
you.
I couldn't see her.
I think she's giving the second to Mr. Doherty. So there's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, I think we had a lot of our discussion before we got to this. I don't see any hands waving. So Mr. Hawley, can we vote on this?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Motion carried. We have one other Superintendent of Human Resources resolution, and that is a resolution to initiate procedures under Ohio law for the retirement and reemployment of Dara Hudson as part-time French and Spanish teacher for the 2020-2021 school year. Is there a motion? I see Ms. Pettit. And a second. I can second that motion. I will simply point out that this is the beginning of the process. This is not the final resolution on this process. The Ohio law states that if you are considering the rehiring of a person who has retired, there needs to be a public hearing for that. And so these pieces under this resolution are setting up that hearing. There will be another resolution before there is a vote to rehire Dara Hudson. Are there any questions?
Kathy, my understanding is that this is kind of a unique situation because what we're trying to do is to fill both French and Spanish, and that's the combination of those skills is a little hard to come by, and we don't need a full-time person.
I see Robin nodding.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
She is dual certified, and we're in need of about 3 to 4 bells of a combination of one French and 2 or 3 Spanish, or the other way. And she is willing to come and help us out for a year. And it is a cost-saving measure. While we have that option to do retire, rehire for teachers, we take that very seriously, and we want it to always be in the best interest of the district and the teacher and the students, and to be cost effective. So it's not, since I've been here, we have not recommended a teacher to be retired, rehired. This is the first time. It's a unique situation, and we consider them case by case.
Any other questions? All right, then can we vote on that, Mr. Hawley?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Motion carried. At this point, unless there is any other business which I have missed, it would be appropriate for this board to consider entering into executive session, and I'll read that in a moment. I don't see anybody waving to say that we've missed anything that was on the agenda, because once we go into executive session, we hope that the link will hold. And then what we will do is we will leave the Zoom meeting for executive session, and then we will come back into the Zoom meeting once executive session is over, but we will come back into the Zoom meeting merely to entertain a motion to adjourn. There would be no other business that would come before the board after the executive session. That's just for the point of view of our audience. And so I don't see anything else that we need to cover. So at this moment, we would entertain a motion to enter into executive session to review negotiations with public employees concerning compensation or other terms or condition of their employment. Is there a motion? I see Ms. Pettit. Is there a second?
I can second that.
I see Dr. Schwetzenau. I can pronounce it when I'm not on the spot. So we have a motion and a second to go into executive session. Can we have a vote on that, Mr. Hawley?
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty. Mr. Doherty, I think you're on mute still.
So sorry.
Oh, you're
Yes.
fine. Thank you. And Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. So motion carried. I have us going into executive session at, let's see, my computer, 9:25. I don't know if that's what everybody else has, but going into that. So we will leave the Zoom meeting and go into a separate executive session.
Dr. Lorenz, I believe everybody is back.
Okay, let me just check. Okay, I couldn't see everybody. Okay, so are we now live again?
Yes.
Okay, we are back from executive session. And so I will simply note that we are out of executive session at 9:50 p.m. And since there is no other business before this board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
I see Ms. Pettit moving to adjourn. Is there a second? I see Mrs. Washburn. Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Oh,
We don't have Mr. Hawley.
Not
that's
back?
the one person we're missing. Oops.
Kathy, you said you checked.
I looked for Dr. Schwetzenow. I did not look for Mr. Hawley. I was told everybody was here. We're gonna have to do that again.
Mr. Hawley must be stuck in traffic now.
Well, we're still out of executive session at 9:50. We're simply waiting for our treasurer.
Kathy, he's having some connection issues.
Just tell us if we don't have them, we have to vote in a new treasurer.
Yes, he did just tell us that. I don't want to have to vote in a new treasurer pro tem just to adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, buddy.
Oh, my.
Oh, well, I vote, is that Doc Brown?
That is Doc Brown.
Maybe we can vote him in as treasurer pro tem.
He's not that smart.
No opposable thumbs.
Yeah. He might not do a great job keeping minutes. Although he did teach himself how to play ball on the steps. And he learned how to play on the swing set, which is quite entertaining when he's out there alone.
From Mr. Hawley.
I heard David say he's having connection
Yeah,
issues.
He's trying to log in right now.
Okay.
Well, it looks like our same Zoom feed stayed alive.
Good.
Yeah.
We built, I would say it's like putting up we're bringing an umbrella in case it rains and then it doesn't. So having the backup link was our umbrella in case we crashed again.
Good plan.
How's our audience doing? How many people stayed in the meeting?
All right, Kevin is coming. He's entering right now.
25, Kathy.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody else went to bed.
Right.
All right, welcome, Mr.
Yeah.
Hawley.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'll state again that the board came out of executive session at 9:50 p.m. and with just a couple of technological issues. Since there's no other business, it's appropriate to move to adjourn. I believe that I saw Ms. Pettit move to adjourn and Mrs. Washburn second a motion to adjourn. And so we're going to try again. Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Dr. Swetchenow?
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
Motion carried. The meeting is adjourned at 9:55 p.m. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our audience for their patience waiting for us to come back. And we look forward to the next meeting next week.
Thank you.
Great. See you
Good
soon.
night, all.
Thank you all. Good night.
Bye. Thanks.